When the White Walker suddenly heard Leon's voice, he jumped up instantly with a look of horror. But before it could escape, Benyon Stark stood in front of it. He saw Benyon Stark walking towards him with a sword in hand and a serious look on his face. The White Walker felt extremely panicked. What should I do? What should I do? I feel like I'm going to die. The White Walker was greatly panicked and couldn't stop thinking in his mind. However, the human above its head raised his hand. Wait a minute, Benyon, I think this White Walker seems quite special. Leon's voice sounded like heavenly music to the White Walker's ears. If it had a choice, it would not want to be a White Walker. What's the point of looking so majestic? It still sits on a horse all day and wanders around with a bunch of low-energy whites. My Lord Commander, this White Walker was transformed from Craster's son. He can't speak, but there's nothing special about him. Please let me kill him. Benyon Stark was not going to joke around with the White Walkers. He drew his sword and was ready to go forward and kill them. If Benyon Stark is still at the level it is familiar with, then the White Walkers will fight him. But the problem is that the White Walkers have just witnessed Benyon Stark's fighting power after he turned into a human. That guy, chopping corpses like he was playing Fruit Ninja, how could I possibly beat him? Although it was embarrassing, it had to admit the fact that Benyon Stark was now a very capable fighter. So, the White Walker took 2 steps back and raised his hands. But this time it didn't brew any ice crystal spears or any other magic. Just hold it high above your head. Looking at the familiar posture of the White Walker, Leon couldn't help but stop it. Wait. It seems to surrender. Benyon Stark's sword burst out with a breathtaking cold light and stopped less than half a millimeter away from the White Walker's neck. Feeling the sharp edge of the long sword, the White Walker's teeth bit up and down violently. No one knew whether it was because it was cold because it was wearing too little or because it was afraid of something. In short, after seeing Leon slaughter tens of thousands of whites in less than 10 minutes, the White Walkers no longer had any resistance in their hearts. Benyon Stark also narrowed his eyes, somewhat confused as to why his former colleague was posing with his hands raised high. Nonsense, if it had been raised a little slower, or spoken in lion dialect a little slower, it would have been sent a long time ago. Since it was the first time that Leon had seen such an interesting White Walker, who actually played the game of surrendering when humans couldn't defeat him, he urged his white horse to walk in front of the White Walker and looked him up and down. Can you speak? The White Walker who was transformed from Castor's son naturally shook his head, but this action also proved Leon's guess, that is, White Walkers can also communicate. Rather than a mere tool of the Night King. Commander-in-Chief, stop talking nonsense to him and let me kill him. Although Benyon Stark's character was not so impulsive, after recovering from being a White Walker, he hated these creatures so much that he wanted to kill them as soon as possible, so he repeatedly persuaded Leon to take action. Wait a minute. I'll ask it a question first. If it answers it wrong, you can kill it later. After saying that, while the White Walker looked forward to life, Leon asked the White Walker with some curiosity. Would you like to vote? Leon hadn't finished saying the word surrender. The White Walker respectfully performed the standard half-kneeling salute of a knight that was very popular on the continent to Leon. He knelt so quickly that Benyon Stark's face twitched when he saw it. Although the White Walkers could not utter those elegant and touching oaths, Leon clearly heard the voice of the system in his ears. Received an application from the level 6 soldier, White Walker, to join the team. Do you agree? Good fellow. I said good fellow. I agree. I definitely agree. The White Walker stood up again, and Leon found that the will-o'-the-wisp in its eyes seemed deeper and bluer. Leon's observation was correct. After the White Walker stood up, he suddenly had a lot more insights in his mind, and his strength also increased a lot. He didn't know whether it was an illusion or reality. Until it looked at Benyon Stark, it was silent for a while, and suddenly realized. It turns out that as long as you pledge allegiance to this human, you can gain power. In fact, the power of the White Walkers did not increase much. This was entirely the result of their own imagination after seeing Benyon Stark suddenly become so strong. After all, it was only a rank 6 soldier. Although the system asked Leon whether he wanted to be promoted to a personal guard, it rejected the request. What a joke, there are only 2 spots left. In Leon's mind, his guards must be either top-notch masters like Benyon Stark or at least at the level of the Night King to be respectable, right? Commander-in-Chief, you. Seeing the White Walker stand up and stand respectfully in front of Leon, holding the stirrups of his horse for him, the scene was so incongruous that Benyon Stark didn't know what to say for a moment. White Walkers cannot be trusted. After holding it in for a long time, Benyon Stark gave a reason. It doesn't matter. No one dares to betray the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. De Huang, remember this sentence and spread it to the whole world for me when the time comes. As Leon spoke, he raised his hand and patted the White Walker's head. In his opinion, since the White Walkers had no names anyway and their skin was relatively white, he might as well just call them rhubarb. De Huang was suddenly slapped on the head, and felt humiliated, and even more furious. He thought, if it wasn't for the fact that Leon killed tens of thousands of zombies with ease, it would have made Leon look bad. No matter how awesome you are, can you be better than the Night King? I was just pretending to surrender in the face of death threats. It's ridiculous that humans can't see that. When the Night King arrives. No matter what he was thinking, after hearing Leon's order, De Huang still glanced sideways, and a humane and flattering smile appeared on his frosty face. De Huang nodded obediently, indicating that he had taken note of it. Seeing that the matter was done, Benyon Stark rode on his white horse with a strange look on his face and led the way to the next hiding place. De Huang is incredibly fast. The speed at which his two legs flap is actually half a step faster than that of the Shikigami, and climbing over mountains and crossing rivers is no problem for him. It was already evening when we reached the next White Walker hideout. The leader of the zombie army here also discovered this strange trio at the first time, but he did not order his zombies to charge immediately. Instead, he communicated intensely with De Huang using the unique eye contact method of the White Walkers. Strange, why don't these zombies pounce on us? Sitting on the corpse horse, Leon chose a place with an excellent view to shoot arrows, but after waiting for a long time, he did not see the corpses coming up shouting and yelling to deliver the golden dragon. So he asked Benyon Stark to go forward and lure the monster away. But just as Benyon Stark was getting ready and preparing to charge alone. I don't know what De Huang and the White Walker talked about, but they looked very unhappy. The latter had an expression on his face that said, "Are you kidding me?" Then, without waiting for Benyon Stark to rush forward to attract their attention, the White Walkers waved their hands. F1 F3. Along with the roar of the White Walkers, De Huang suddenly shuddered, feeling that the scene in front of him was very familiar and he had seen it before. Food Eater, Wei Junjia, from now on you will be called Xiao He. Half an hour later, among the corpses of the whites, Leon patted the shoulder of his second White Walker subordinate affectionately. Xiao He immediately cursed in his heart, what a weird name. But as a White Walker transformed from Craster's son, it couldn't curse. At the same time, I was thinking to myself, it turns out what De Huang said is true, the bow and arrow in this human's hand is so scary. The Blackies attacked as usual, but Leon attacked them in a way he had never seen before. It felt like being sprayed with dragon flame by a giant dragon, and the damage caused by the two was similar. So, Xiao He decided to swallow his anger for the time being and wait until the Night King came to deal with Leon himself. As for whether to betray Leon, he would have to wait until the Night King came. I have to say that it's great to be alive. Ben Yang, how long do you think it will take to wipe out the entire army of the dead under the Night King at my current speed? Listen to Leon say arrogant words in the most nonchalant tone that no one in the entire continent would dare to say. After 2 crushing games, Benyon Stark was surprised to find that he seemed to have gradually gotten used to Lion's tone and subconsciously began to think about it seriously. If the entire army of the dead is wiped out, and Lion once told him that the free people have all surrendered, then the existence of the Night's Watch will no longer be necessary, and then the watch of Benyon Stark and other Night's Watch brothers may end forever in this generation. Benyon Stark was in his prime, and he had also heard the news that his brother Ned Stark had been murdered. How could he not want to avenge his brother and even become the king in the north? After a long period of wild thoughts, Benyon Stark finally raised his head and said, based on the current efficiency of the Commander-in-Chief, in about 10 days, there won't be a zombie army with more than 1,000 men in the entire Thryn Mountains. Although it sounds easy to hear Benyon Stark say it, the size of the then mountains is equivalent to half the size of the north. If Leon had not obtained the Ghoul Horse, a legendary mount that works tirelessly to build roads through mountains and bridges over rivers, it would probably take him a month just to ride the horse around the circle. After hearing what Benyon Stark said, Big Yellow and Little Black shuddered at the same time and looked at each other subconsciously. If we let this Demon King continue to kill, the Night King will be left alone. A new brother is about to join the Commander-in-Chief's team. De Huang. You. It was obvious that the 2 White Walkers did not agree on their ideas. After 2 big battles, Big Yellow had already shown signs of complete submission. Although the White Walkers cannot commit acts of betrayal due to the limitations of the system's mind seal, it does not prevent them from having wild thoughts. That's great. Not only can we wipe out the army of whites, but we can also recruit White Walkers as our subordinates. After saying that, Leon looked back at the 2 White Walker cavalrymen following behind him, and asked with a sharp look in his eyes. Will you ask me for a weekly salary, or even food and equipment? As soon as the words fell, 2 White Walkers were seen gesticulating and dancing. Oh, sorry, I forgot you can't talk, so that means you don't have to, right? Lion slapped his head, thinking that his memory seemed to be a little too bad. Benyon Stark had clearly said that these 2 White Walkers were naturally taciturn. When the 2 White Walkers heard what Leon said, they nodded in agreement. The 4 men and 4 horses continued on their journey, heading for the next White Walker hiding place. Inside King Sen's palace, the Night King closed his eyes and thought for a moment, then looked at the alien Havertz below. The latter's pupils were normal, and he was obviously not immersed in the flight simulation, so he asked in a dignified voice. Where is my army heading to? The alien Havertz wanted to say with a smile, Night King, both of your armies have been destroyed, and the 2 White Walkers who led them have also rebelled. But he didn't dare. After racking his brains for a moment, he decided to gloss over it for the time being. Otherwise, what would he do if Yawang got angry again and took it out on him? The dozens of White Walker leaders you sent to exterminate humans are on their way, and the front line of the Then Mountains is in a scorching state. Scorched? How can it be so? Millions of whites in the Thryn mountains are rushing forward, even the sky and the earth will change color. What's the point of being so scorched? The Night King had a puzzled look in his eyes. The vague words of the alien Havertz made him feel insulted again. So he grasped the air with his big hand, and the alien pillar Havertz took off again. Tell the White Walkers to speed up and bring back the human and the traitor Benyon Stark. In the Then Mountains, after clearing out another White Walker hideout, Lion had another White Walker named Xiaoqing behind him. Suddenly, Leon heard a sound like an avalanche coming from a ridge not far away. Looking towards the direction of the sound, I saw a black line on the mountain ridge rushing towards me as fast as thunder and meteor. Haha! The Night King's army has arrived. Xiao He behind Leon clapped his hands, his face full of joy. The sound that Leon heard was not an avalanche, but the sound of a dense army of zombies running, like a wave. Benyon Stark squinted his eyes and observed for a while, then suddenly opened them. Lord Commander, this is the movement that can only be caused by a large army of whites led by at least dozens of White Walkers. Upon hearing Benyon Stark's words, among the 3 White Walkers behind Lion, only Xiao Huang quickly condensed an ice crystal spear in his hand and prepared for battle. Xiao He looked like he was watching a show, while Xiaoqing had a ruthless look on his face, wavering between betrayal and rebellion. However, the movements of the 3 White Walker men did not affect Lion's performance at all. Occupy the high ground. Lion gave an order in an orderly manner, and immediately Benyon Stark and De Huang began to look around. After a moment, De Huang didn't say anything, but pointed to a mountain wall in the distance that was as smooth as a horizontal plane. Lion understood De Huang's intention at this moment, and his eyes lit up. Then he led the 4 people towards the mountain wall without hesitation. As we all know, the ability of the ghoul horse to ignore terrain allows it to easily run up a steep mountain wall of nearly 90 degrees, and hang on the mountain wall as steadily as a rock climber without moving. When the army of zombies arrived at the foot of the mountain wall, they could only look at the few geckos on the mountain wall and roar helplessly. When dozens of White Walkers came to the foot of the mountain wall, one of them rode his white horse towards Leon without hesitation. As the saying goes, everyone will die one day, but the first bird to stick its head out dies faster. Pang! A large rain of arrows then fell from the top of the mountain wall, and the dense rain of arrows directly shot the daring White Walker into pieces in mid-air. At this time, Lion's one arrow can be transformed into a rain of nearly 500 arrows. With the death of this White Walker, the army of zombies he led all fell dead instantly. A vacuum instantly formed among the huge army of zombies. The dozens of remaining White Walkers looked at each other in horror, then looked at the steep mountain wall, and suddenly one of them came up with a plan. The next moment, all the zombies started to play the human pyramid game and began to climb up directly under Leon's feet by stepping on their companions' bodies. The scene was just like something out of the World War Z movie. But Leon was not worried. The mountain wall where he was hundreds of meters high. Even if the zombies climbed up like a human pyramid without fear of death, they could not withstand Leon's endless rain of arrows. Ha 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 ha. Looking at the inventory where at least 200 or 300 gold dragons were shot out of one arrow, Leon felt indescribably happy. Now, these dozens of White Walkers could no longer sit still. They watched their army of zombies climbing up fearlessly, but they were always a step away from reaching Leon. Within just a few minutes after the battle began, at least 3 or 4 meters of zombie corpses piled up under Leon's feet. For every meter the zombies climbed, they had to pay the price of almost 1,000 corpses. If the army of zombies were replaced by an ordinary human army, their morale would have collapsed by now. No matter how worthless the zombies were, this kind of consumption method had never been seen before, not to mention that their only enemy from beginning to end was Leon. Less than half an hour later, the corpses of the Whites had even spread to the feet of a group of White Walkers who were 100 meters away from the mountain wall. Go and report to the Night King. This human is too ferocious. A talking White Walker was startled and kept calling out to his companions. But before the White Walker turned around to report, the Night King, who had sensed the huge casualties among his men, could no longer sit still and came forward spontaneously. Accompanied by the sound of Game of Thrones' heavy theme song played on cello. The Night King stepped onto the pile of whites that was stacked high enough to look at Leon. By the way, this is also the first time Leon has seen the Night King since his time travel. The Night King carried a remarkable two-handed ice sword on his back, wore an ice crystal crown on his head, and wore black chain mail. He walked across the snowy plain step by step. The biting cold wind whistled around him, but could not touch his iron-cold face. Its gaze is deep and distant, as if it has traveled through endless time and space, staring at the darkness that is about to fall. Behind him was a nearly endless army of zombies. Their footsteps were in perfect unison, like a tragic elegy, echoing in the silent snowy night. Even though it was the first time that Lion saw such a high-end appearance, he was almost blinded for a moment. And he silently wrote down this appearance in his little notebook. When the Night King slowly stepped onto the hill built by zombies, the distance between him and Leon was less than 50 meters. The Night King did not talk to Leon first, but glanced down at the whites lying on the ground with a murderous look. Then he looked up, his eyes filled with anger and conflicting emotions, as if he felt that simply killing Leon with a spear would not quell the rage within him. Behind Leon, Xiao He and Xiao Qing, who had been unable to contain themselves, were ready to rebel. They condensed an ice crystal spear and were about to stab Leon from behind. Benyon Stark and Rhubarb, who had been keeping an eye on the two traitors, were attracted by the Night King's unique appearance and were caught off guard. They only had time to shout, "Watch out!" But the next second, the stabbing scene that the two imagined did not happen. Before the two White Walkers were about to attack, their eyes suddenly became clear, as if they were a husky that was about to bite someone but was suddenly fed 10 meals of dragon fruit and became docile. This is the system's ideological stamp at work. The Night King soon noticed the abnormality of the two White Walkers, and his heart skipped a beat. Then he tried decisively for a moment and found that he encountered the same situation as Benyon Stark, and he could not control the life and death of these two White Walkers. So, before killing Leon, the Night King was somewhat curious about what means Leon had used to be able to undo the means he had set. "Human, how could the fate of my men fall into your hands? Hand over the methods and the Horn of Winter, and I will give you a dignified death." The Night King's voice was cold and emotionless, but there was also a hint of curiosity. Originally, Lion was a little worried that with the support of the Night King's invincible home court in this land of eternal winter, he would be able to regain control of the White Walkers, including Benyon Stark. But at present, it is clear that panels are superior. So Leon laughed, haha, and said without any psychological pressure, "A wise bird chooses the tree to roost in, and a wise minister chooses the master to serve." These words naturally sounded like a long string when spoken in the common language of Westeros. Even though the Night King had lived for countless millennia, it took him a long time to understand the meaning of this sentence. "Arrogant boy, are you saying that I am not as good as you?" The Night King's voice was filled with anger. As his tone lowered, the temperature of the air around him dropped sharply, and the blizzard that had been relatively calm suddenly became much more violent. "You're right. A guy who walked for 8 seasons and finally died in Winterfell is nothing to brag about." Not only did Leon have no fear of the Night King in front of him, he also had no respect for him at all. Of course, Leon's stereotype of the Night King comes from the TV series, and the ending of the Night King in the original book has not yet been announced. At this time, the Night King was in a state of alternating strong and weak quantum entanglement. As powerful as the legendary destruction of heaven and earth, if mankind did not produce a last hero like Azor Aha, the son of light, it will inevitably be a situation where all of humanity is conquered by the Night King. But he was weak and died at the hands of Arya Stark, the faceless man who had only a Valyrian steel dagger and less than a few years of training. You? Okay, I've changed my mind now. I'm going to give you a not-so-dignified death. Before I figure it out, I'll start with these traitors. After saying that, the Night King did not draw his sword, but spread out his palms flat. From above his palms, several ice crystal spears with extraordinary power condensed in the air, and instantly threw them towards Benyon Stark and the other three. Feeling a death threat no less than that brought to them by Lion, the other three White Walkers tried to escape on horseback, except for Benyon Stark who had already prepared for death. But the speed of the ice crystal spear seemed to be faster than expected. The next moment, except for Lion who swung his sword to block it for Ban Yang and De Huang who were standing close to him, Xiao He and Xiao Qing, who were jumping around again and again, were nailed to the mountain wall by the Night King's ice crystal spear. Even after piercing their bodies, the ice crystal spears continued to be powerful, blasting two large pits with a diameter of 10 meters in the mountain. After Lion swung his sword twice with all his strength to shatter the ice crystal spear, he felt that his endurance was severely overdrawn. Speaking of it alone, the Night King's own power is actually no less than that of Leon after the panel points are added. This was also the first time that Lion encountered an opponent who could fight with him after his strength was fully restored. Leon couldn't help but look at the Night King with shining eyes. No matter how hard one tries, after killing tens or even hundreds of thousands of White Walkers like mowing the grass, how could one not be happy if a strong man who could stop him suddenly fell from the sky? When the Night King looked at Leon again, he put away the contempt in his heart. After all, the Night King is not invincible in historical records. In ancient times, he was defeated by the then King of the North, Brandon the Liberator, and Jovman, King beyond the wall. Although those two heroes died after defeating the Night King, it took the Night King thousands of years to accumulate strength before he could make a comeback. Thinking of the painful lesson of that year, the Night King couldn't help but be a little wary of Leon. Who are you? Why can you block my attack? The Night King had a hostile look on his face and asked in a stern voice, but his aura was suppressed by Leon and his voice also became low. When Leon heard the Night King asking for his name so seriously, he immediately leaned back tactically on his white horse, remaining silent while wanting his men to give his name for him. But after a long time, there was silence in the air. Leon looked at De Huang and Benyon Stark behind him with the same unfriendly expression as the Night King. When seeing Leon's expression turn from anger to murderous, De Huang quickly pointed to his mouth, and the latter immediately realized what had happened. Benyon Stark then rode forward, walked between the Night King and Lion, pointed at Lion and said, "Standing before you is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, the King beyond the wall. His name is Leon Victor." The Night King listened for a while with a serious expression before realizing that Benyon Stark's introduction was so inadequate, which meant that Lion was just a young man just starting out. But then, the Night King thought with horror. Could it be that any leader of the Night's Watch and the people beyond the wall would be so powerful? The Night King thought to himself, but did not show such timid doubt on his face. "Very good. I admit that you are a worthy opponent. I am willing to treat you equally as a king should be treated. Now, let's talk about why you killed so many of my men." To be honest, the Night King didn't come up and start shouting for war, which was beyond Leon's expectations. But his stereotype of the Night King comes entirely from that damn badly ended TV series. In the TV series, the Night King is a ruthless man who doesn't talk much and dies miserably, but who would have known that the Night King in reality is so talkative? When Leon heard the Night King asking about his purpose, he thought about it and finally decided to be more open and aboveboard. As a human being, you have to be frank and treat others with sincerity. So Leon spoke sincerely, "I want to kill you, and before I kill you, I will kill your men first." Even though the Night King had lived for so long, it was the first time he had heard such shocking remarks. "Just you? If I wanted, you would have died by now and then been resurrected by me and killed again. If it keeps repeating, you won't even have a complete corpse left." The Night King resisted the urge to act immediately, for he was worried that killing Leon rashly would lead to unexpected trouble. After all, it was cheated by a certain existence thousands of years ago, and now there is a shadow in its heart. If that being had not promised the Night King would have waited for so many years anyway. After waiting for a while, he would definitely not stop the Night King from unifying the world. The Night King didn't believe in that existence at that time, not to mention that now Leon suddenly appeared here and killed his men wantonly. Maybe he was sent by that existence to disrupt its plan. Thinking of this, the Night King squinted his eyes and looked at Leon, then activated his ability to peek into the long river of time. A moment later, the Night King's face was filled with horror as if he had heard that Leon was going to kill his entire family. Because of it, Lion's past is not seen in the long river of time. And in the long river of time, Lion's future was nothing. Even the faces of the people around Lion were covered with a faint shadow, preventing him from peeking into their fate. You have to know that the Night King has never encountered such a situation before. He can even see clearly that in the future there will be a mother of dragons leading 3 extinct dragons north. And Leon was able to completely hide his tracks in the long river of time. To do this, there must be someone behind him who is as powerful as that person. So, seeing this clearly, the Night King said in a straightforward and slightly negotiating tone. I cannot fulfill your wish, please change it. When the Night King said this, the White Walkers behind him who had been ready for battle were suddenly stunned. They threw away their previous cold personalities and all took a deep breath. What the hell? The Night King was willing to compromise with a human? Moreover, this human had blatantly provoked the Night King before and even wanted to kill him. How could the Night King not be angry? Thinking of this, a certain smart man cleared his throat and walked towards the Night King with a deep look in his eyes. The person who came was the alien Havertz. He was about to speak and wanted to persuade the Night King, why be polite to Lion? Even if we can't beat Lion, we can also fight in a group. Roll. However, before the alien Havertz could say a word, the Night King turned around and glared at him, and he flew backwards. That person just now looked so familiar, I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. Leon thought secretly in his heart as he watched the ignorant White Walker fly backwards. Then you hand over several million ghouls and arrange them in this death-seeking formation. I will let you go after you kill them all. As he spoke, Leon had a money-grubbing expression on his face, which made the Night King quite unhappy, as if the Night King's men were just walking golden dragons in Leon's eyes. Millions? There are 2 million ghouls in the land of eternal winter. Now you have killed only a few 100,000. How many more do you want to kill? Impossible. The Night King temporarily tolerated the disrespect in Leon's words because the person behind Leon had the power to erase even the traces of time. In its view, as long as it can tolerate the existence behind it until the agreed deadline, it will be able to kill everyone and no one will dare to stop it. Lion's little disrespectful words today are nothing. Oh, then you swear that you will never set foot outside the land of eternal winter in my lifetime. Seeing that the Night King refused to let his men die, Leon had no choice but to issue an ultimatum. Sure enough, the Night King's face, which was made of ice, turned red as if fire burned his eyebrows after hearing Leon's words. I refuse. I will fight to the death. White Walker X42 joins the battle. Seeing that Leon is no more than 16 years old, the day he dies of old age will long exceed the date promised by the being behind the Night King. The Night King suddenly felt that he had been fooled by that being, and in anger and humiliation, he even began to hate Leon. So, the Night King solemnly drew out the ice sword behind him, which showed that he was extremely serious now and he didn't even bother to throw away the ice crystal spear which had less damage. He was ready to fight with Leon to the death. Humph! I knew you were going to do something desperate. I have been on guard against you for a long time. After saying that, Leon quickly pulled out the black and white kiss from his waist and collided with the Night King who was running towards him quickly. Boom! There was a sound of metal collision that was countless times louder than forging iron, and Leon's black and white kiss and the ice sword in the Night King's hand separated at the touch. Ow! Whether Leon can hold out for a round is not the point, but the white horse under his crotch certainly can't withstand it. After a long and tragic howl, the white horse was directly knocked over by the Night King's sword, and Leon was also knocked off the horse by the Night King's sword. Fuck, is this the power of the Night King? After landing, Leon quickly glanced at his own endurance value on the panel, which was also his health value. There's only a little blood left. But at this moment, Leon was not panicked. Instead, he felt happy because the Night King failed to kill him instantly. It's like playing a soul-based game. You're only afraid of the boss being killed in one move, not afraid of the boss's health bar showing. Seeing that Leon survived a round of fighting with him, the Night King's face was solemn. You know, there is no opponent in the world that he cannot kill instantly with one move. What's more, they are fighting at home in the land of eternal winter. With the home buff, he is immortal and has the blessing of powerful ice magic. That's it. Can't even kill Leon? As expected, it was sent by that despicable being to interrupt his plans. Just as the Night King was thinking about this in his mind, Leon also moved, but this time his target was not the Night King, but the dozens of White Walkers rushing over from behind him. Pang! Lion aimed his Ryasei bow at the most aggressive White Walker and blew it up in midair along with its horse. Good news, he is back to full health. Feeling that all his strength has returned, Leon is full of confidence and ready to fight the Night King again. After being slashed by the Night King and killing a White Walker, Leon's health bar was like a roller coaster, and it quickly returned to the highest point. Just when the Night King was about to kill, he discovered that Leon, who was hit by his sword and not dead but was like a candle in the wind, not only did not beg for mercy, but instead attacked his own White Walker in front of him. As a king, he can't even take care of his subordinates. Lion's move is a complete slap in the face. Damn you human, focus on me. Look at the sword. What the Night King didn't know was that after Leon killed a White Walker in an instant, his stamina and health were fully restored, while the backlash he suffered from the fight was real. However, in this land of eternal winter, the Night King's health can slowly recover, but not as fast as Leon's bloodthirstiness. One is the king of the people of the wall and even beyond the wall, the other is the Night King of millions of whites in the land of eternal winter. The battle between the two kings made it impossible for the subordinates of both sides to intervene. The confrontation between Leon and the Night King instantly became intense. What made the Night King more and more annoyed was that every time Leon passed him in a duel, he would suddenly shoot one of his men with his powerful bow and arrow, and then fight him again with full energy. After dozens of rounds, even the Night King felt that his health had been reduced by half due to Leon's shameless style of play. No. Human, what's wrong with you? Why can't I kill you? After a confrontation, the Night King did not launch an attack immediately, but stood there and asked Leon with a serious look. Leon glanced at his full endurance bar and couldn't help but smile. Because you are too weak, you can't beat me, so naturally you can't kill me. To be honest, Leon didn't expect the Night King to be so difficult to deal with. After dozens of rounds of fighting, the battlefield environment under the feet of the two men had changed drastically. The aftermath of the battle even flattened the hill-like pile of zombies, and the surrounding mountain trees were completely destroyed. However, Leon found the fight more and more easy. He even felt that even if he couldn't kill the Night King, defeating him once would greatly improve his overall attributes. Hearing Leon standing there and mocking as if nothing had happened, the Night King was furious. He stopped thinking and his mind was filled with the thought of killing Leon, the arrogant human being. However, the black and white kiss in Leon's hand showed signs of metal fatigue again. One can't help but wonder if the legendary indestructible Valyrian steel sword will break if it fights the Night King a few more times. So after another fight, Lion quickly distanced himself from the Night King and took out the glazed bow and aimed it at the Night King. Seeing that he could not gain any advantage in infantry combat, the Night King naturally thought of this. He then raised his hands and conjured up dozens of ice crystal spears that hung above his head. The next moment, the long-range attacks of the two kings fell on each other's heads. As the old saying goes, the left side has always been the loser in battles. The dozens of ice crystal spears fired by the Night King standing on the left naturally could not withstand the multiple rain of arrows after Leon replaced them with dragon crystal arrows. Pang! The Night King's face was full of disbelief. After nearly 1,000 dragon crystal arrows blew up its ice crystal spears in mid-air, they continued to fly towards it with unabated momentum. In a flash, hundreds of dragon crystal arrows were inserted into the Night King's body. The Night King's body was like a shattered piece of human glass. Cracks burst out from the countless wounds on his body and scattered all over the ground in an instant. Here, except for dozens of White Walkers under the Night King who did not collapse, the remaining more than tens of thousands of whites collapsed at the same time after the Night King was defeated. As expected, dragon crystal arrows are more effective against White Walkers. Leon was ecstatic, not only because he defeated the Night King, but also because he felt that the experience value on the panel had increased rapidly, and Leon looked at the ice crystal crown that appeared out of thin air in his hand. He recognized this crown. Wasn't it the one on the Night King's head? The plundering skill that had been dormant for dozens of chapters was finally successfully launched. This time, the Night King's crown was even taken off. This made Leon look forward to what would happen when the Night King was defeated next time. Except for the dozen or so White Walkers killed by Leon to restore his stamina, the rest were held back by Benyon Stark and Big Yellow, and were forced into a corner, unable to move forward or backward. After seeing that Leon not only killed the Night King, he also pointed a bow and arrow at himself. After being persuaded by De Wong's eyes, many White Walkers immediately dropped their weapons and acted as if they knew what was happening. They can't even defeat the Night King, so why should these White Walkers, who can only lead a lonely life every month, fight? At the same time, in King Thurn's palace, the Night King, who had rebuilt his body with the help of the ice elements, had a grim and unbelievable look on his face. It really didn't expect that it would be defeated by a human. Damn it, the bow and arrow in the human's hand is a divine weapon of the same level as the Lightbringer in Azor's hand. If I were not in the land of eternal winter, I'm afraid it would have completely disappeared by now. Thinking of this, the Night King felt a little scared. There were only a few White Walkers in the palace. They looked at the Night King without emotion. But everyone who saw the Night King being reborn on the ice crystal platform in such an embarrassed and bald appearance, even though the result was unbelievable, knew that the Night King was defeated. But the Night King didn't notice the chill on his head, and he felt unwilling to accept it. When the Night King appeared in front of Leon again, he did not immediately seek revenge, shout for killing, and even ignored the dozens of White Walker traitors behind Leon. However, the Night King's tone was still not very friendly, but when he saw that Leon was still unsatisfied, he quickly said with a tone that was almost gritting his teeth. "Humans, enough." Leon put down his bow and arrow. After seeing the tens of thousands of zombies collapse after the death of the Night King, he couldn't bear to kill it anymore. Those are tens of thousands of real golden dragons. What's the matter, Night King, are you going to consider my suggestion? That's right, I can't beat you, but you can't touch these undead spirits anymore. I promise you that I will never go south again in your lifetime. The Night King is really scared by Leon now. If Leon gets angry and kills all his millions of White Walkers, it will be terrible. Besides, the Horn of Winter is not in his hand. At that time, even the Wall of Despair may become an insurmountable barrier for him. It's only a few decades. Seeing that Leon is so young, the Night King will definitely be unwilling to be lonely and participate in the Game of Thrones that the mainlanders are keen on. At that time, his lifespan will be greatly reduced. It's only a dozen years or so, the Night King can wait. As long as Leon stops killing its army of White Walkers, everything will be fine. However, after hearing the Night King's compromising words, Leon simply said oh and couldn't wait to draw his bow and arrow to send the Night King to the west. In King Thurn's palace, the White Walkers watched with trepidation as the Night King was reborn again. This time, the Night King threw away the black chain armor that made him look so classy. After noticing the strange look in his subordinate's eyes, the Night King couldn't help but look at himself suspiciously. My armor of eternal life. The Night King's loud and aggrieved roar instantly filled the entire royal city of Thurn. After a long time, as Leon and his many White Walker subordinates waited, the Night King's handsome and heroic figure never appeared in everyone's sight again. Instead, there was a trembling and somewhat overly nervous White Walker. It rode a white horse and brought a message from the Night King. "Human, you win. Anyway, whatever you say is what counts." After the White Walker finished speaking, Lion just listened with a blank expression. However, many of his former colleagues behind him stared at it fiercely with their eyes blazing with blue fire, as if they were going to eat it alive the next moment. "I will lead the undead army back to the land of eternal winter. We don't even need the Thryn capital anymore. If you are not afraid of death, follow me." In this terrifying atmosphere, after the White Walker mustered up the courage to convey the Night King's words, the blue fire in his eyes flickered, and it was obvious that he was extremely frightened of Leon. However, Lion did not make things difficult for this little White Walker. When two armies were fighting, they would not kill the messenger. "Go back and tell the Night King that his White Walker cavalry is pretty good. Send me 10 White Walkers every month. The number can only be more, not less. If there is one less White Walker, I will use the Night King himself to make up the number." "Okay, that's all I have to say." Who agrees and who disagrees? Naturally, no one objected. Lion found another ownerless white horse to ride on, waved to the White Walker who delivered the message, and the latter left immediately as if he had been pardoned. Later historians of Westeros recorded this day forever in the annals of history, and called the agreement reached between Lion and the Night King the Alliance of Then. Later, this covenant ensured that for at least 200 years, the Night King would never dare to have the intention of moving south again, because even if Leon died, the Night King was worried that Leon's descendants would come to him again with the glazed bow and block the fountain to abuse him. Commander-in-Chief, should we go back to Black Iron Castle next? Witnessing the great victory against the Night King, Benyon Stark couldn't help but ask this question. In his eyes, the evil of the White Walkers that had plagued the continent for thousands of years had not ended with the death of the Night King, but Lion alone had constituted a strategic deterrent. Anyway, as long as the Ryasei bow was in Lion's hands, the Night King would not dare to go south as long as he was alive. The dozens of White Walkers behind him who surrendered and joined Lion's troops all looked embarrassed at this moment. They might feel happy when they were living in shame, but now as Leon's subordinates, they have to go to the human world. This made them feel very embarrassed because in the past their purpose of going to the human world was to spread natural disasters. Now, they have to follow the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch. How will their predecessors, who are also White Walkers, view them? How will humans view them? At this moment, all the surrendered White Walkers had only one emotion in their hearts, that was losing their souls. What a shame! But Leon doesn't have the time to give these White Walkers psychological support. Let's go to Hardhome first. We need to tell those free folks not to rush south. The Night King won't harass them anymore. Even if the Thens are willing to return to their capital, I am willing to negotiate with the Night King on their behalf. After receiving Leon's order, the new Chief White Walker Ranger, Benyon Stark, resolutely took over the burden of command and led a group of White Walkers to follow Leon to Hardhome. A long time after the battle, the alien Havertz, lying among the pile of corpses, finally opened his eyes. It was afraid that Leon might come back to attack it, and it might not be lucky enough to escape from Leon again. After making sure that Lion was really gone, the alien Havertz crawled out from the pile of corpses. It first looked at the direction where Leon left with lingering fear, and couldn't help but sigh that after not seeing him for many days, Leon had grown to the point where he could defeat the Night King twice. I'm afraid the growth trajectory of legendary heroes is not as good as Leon's. But now it is unwilling to go back to the royal city of Thurn. Since the Night King cannot avenge it, why go back and suffer the humiliation? However, Havertz has not gained nothing from his time with the Night King. When the Night King was peeking into the long river of time, Havertz had also seen glimpses of the future. 3 adult dragons were flying over Mirian, Yunkai, and Askia. Calculating the time, the owner of the dragon should still be a young girl who had just obtained a dragon egg. The alien Havertz possesses the vision of an eagle and the ability to control people's hearts. It should not be difficult for him to control the girl to launch Dragon Flame and kill Leon with one breath. Thinking of this, the alien Havertz felt full of energy, but when he thought of his current alien makeup with blue fire in his eyes, he didn't look like a good person at all, so the alien Havertz pulled a black cloth from the ground and wrapped his head tightly. Hardhome is located at the tip of the Stored Point Peninsula that extends into the Shivering Sea, across which is the free city of Bravus. The nearby bay forms a deep water harbor large enough to accommodate the largest ships. Because there were abundant wood and stone nearby, a variety of edible fish were readily available in the sea, and there were even gathering areas for seals and walruses. A gathering place for free people was formed hundreds of years ago, but later a mysterious natural disaster destroyed it. Now, amidst the ruins, 100,000 free men worked together to build a huge, joint tent camp. At this time, large ships kept arriving at the dock in the bay, transporting these free refugees southward. The ones who came to greet them were the free folks' former mortal enemies, the Night's Watch. Now, after Lion defeated the king beyond the wall and had Olaf, Prince of Then, come to Hardhome with the horn of the free folk. 100,000 free men all submitted to the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch, Leon Victor. While commanding the free folk to evacuate, Jon Snow would occasionally look up at the haunted forest in the distance. It seemed that in the next moment, Leon's heroic figure would leap out of the forest, followed closely by a dense army of zombies. That's what Jon Snow suspected. So at any given time, half of the soldiers in Hardhome are sharpening their swords, ready to stop the army of whites rushing out of the haunted forest and rescue their Night's Watch commander. However, no matter how bold his imagination was, he could hardly have predicted that Leon had successfully dealt with the Night King and reached a peace agreement with the army of the dead. As the chief ranger under the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Jon has always been in conflict with Prince Olaf of Then, who claims to be the Lord Commander's greatest warrior. Especially Olaf's foul mouth that spreads annoying sarcasm all the time. It seemed that in his opinion, except for Leon Victor, the other night watchmen were just a mob. Hey! Crow, what are you looking at there? Could it be that the White Walkers were scared out of their wits after the battle at Craster's Keep? Olaf always held 2 objects in his hands, one was the freeman's horn, and the other was the fine steel battle axe he had just asked the blacksmith Donald to make for him. It seemed that with these two things in his hands, he would be the highest-ranking person in Hardhome before Leon came back. But it is not Olaf's fault to look down on John. After all, John was only 16 years old at that time, not to mention the outlier Leon who was the same age as him. In the eyes of the free people, a 16-year-old southerner should be staying in the arms of a wet nurse and receiving breastfeeding, rather than going to the battlefield to show off his prowess. Let's not talk about the dispute that broke out between Jon Snow and Prince Olaf of then in Hardhome. Here, after setting off for Hardhome, Lion finally had time to check his panel attributes and the two new pieces of equipment from the Night King. Identity: Leon Victor, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, King Beyond the Wall. Rating: 34. Family: Level 3, fiefdoms include Dark Iron Keep, East Watch, Shadow Tower, Night Fort, formerly the Night's Watch's sphere of influence. Strength: 30, one-handed, two-handed, polearm. Agility: 23, bow, crossbow, throwing, black and white kiss plus 10. Stamina: 30, riding, running, forging, eternal armor plus 5. Cunning: 11, tea pouring, tactics, vices. Social: 30, charisma, leadership, trade, plus 10 for Crown of the Night King. Intelligence: 23, management, medicine, engineering. Available attribute points: 10. Wow, after reading the panel, Leon had to give a big thumbs up to the Night King. The equipment that dropped after dying twice not only gave Leon 10 free attribute points but also maxed out his endurance and social skills. Now the only two attributes missing from the panel's 6 dimensions are agility and cunning, and Leon can't fully increase the cunning attribute in a short time, so he simply adds all the free attribute points to intelligence. After fighting for such a long time, Lion felt more and more that it was better to break the situation by force. But I somehow feel that many people are calling me a reckless man, so after thinking it over, I decided to maximize my intelligence and try to make up for my shortcomings. In an instant, the panel seemed to have returned to the time when the player logged in, giving Leon a bunch of useful skills. Hands of Forging: you are now self-taught and have reached the level of a top blacksmith. You can forge the ideas in your mind with suitable materials without the need for a blueprint. Charming: increase the persuasion rate when talking with the same sex, and increase affinity with the opposite sex. Forced Purchase and Sale: you can forcefully plunder the goods you like once a month, and the upper limit is the legendary level. Management Doctrine: when you are the commander of an army or are appointed as an administrative officer, the system will pay for the army's salaries, food, equipment, and supplies. Mocking Death: you, or a family member of your choice, are exempt from death once. Invincible: I haven't thought about it yet. After reading a lot of skill introductions, Lion finally knew that the highlight was about to begin. Because the attributes given by the panel are all related to conquering the world, thinking of this, Lion couldn't help but start to look forward to it. Before departure, according to the intelligence from the 7 kingdoms brought by ravens, after the death of Ned Stark, the Northerners, who were dissatisfied with the presence of a Lannister king sitting on the Iron Throne, elected a new king of the North, Robb Stark, who had a blood feud with the Westerlands. But his initial battles after going south were relatively smooth, and Robb Stark's ability was worthy of a hero of the younger generation. He defeated the Western Lords to pieces. But at this critical moment, he was held back by an insider. At this time, he should have arrived at the territory of the Frey family to attend a bloody wedding that buried a large number of northern lords. Lion was just the head coach of the Night's Watch at the time, and he had neither the ability nor the willingness to interfere in the development of history. Even though from his heart, Lion admired Robb Stark's abilities, he was not humble enough to follow him. This was a civil war that almost swept across the 7 kingdoms, known in history as the Rebellion of the 5 Kings. King Balon of the Iron Islands attacked the west coast of Westeros from north to south. Just when the King of the West and the King of the North were fighting fiercely, Stannis Baratheon of Dragonstone made a mistake. Instead of attacking the Westerlies first, which had been distracted by Robb Stark, he went south to Storm's End to find his brother Renly Baratheon. If he took the opportunity to raid King's Landing, he might be the one sitting on the Iron Throne he had always coveted. However, the stubborn Stannis insisted on pacifying the country before fighting the enemy, and was determined to let the entire 7 kingdoms see clearly that he was the legitimate heir to the Iron Throne. He assassinated his brother under the blood magic of the Red Witch Melisandre. But Renly's despicable death at the hands of blood magic made the lords of the Riverlands and the Stormlands see Stannis' true character. This caused the Stormlands family and the Riverlands family who supported Renly to break with him, and brought Stannis a great defeat. However, Stannis did not give up. Instead, he gathered all his troops and turned around to attack King's Landing. Ultimately, all of their elite troops were killed in the Battle of Blackwater. Speaking of which, Stannis is also a talented general. After almost all of his fleet was burned by the wildfire of Tyrion, he still led his army to a desperate battle and almost captured King's Landing. However, he failed in the end and was defeated by Lord Tywin Lannister, who came to support him. He might be on his way north at this time, just because he was stubborn and finally listened to the advice of his only loyal minister, Onion Knight Davos Seaworth, and implemented the kingly plan, which was to lead the remaining troops north to support the Night's Watch, which was in a precarious situation. The common people of the Seven Kingdoms will be able to see his determination and support him in returning to the throne. Moreover, they can take advantage of the situation to recruit these 100,000 savages and thus strengthen the army. However, by the time he arrived at the wall, it would be too late, because Lion had already subdued all the wildlings, and even forced the White Walkers to not dare to go south again. Thinking of this, Leon couldn't help but smile. He wondered what expression would appear on Stannis' face when he found out that he was late. After looking at the panel, Leon naturally turned his attention to the two pieces of equipment in the inventory that he got from the Night King. Crown of the Night King is condensed from the ice element of the land of eternal winter. It can only be worn by the king. It has extremely high defense and the wearer can control the ice element to a small extent. Armor of eternal life is condensed from the ice element of the land of eternal winter. It can only be worn by the king. It has extremely high defense. The wearer can be completely immune to magic attacks and is not susceptible to cold or heat. Since both are condensed from ice elements, you can DIY the above two pieces of equipment into the appearance you want, and even wear them invisibly. Lion's eyes lit up when he saw it. At present, the equipment on Lion was too biased towards attack, and the appearance of the Night King was like a pillow for someone who was sleepy. The two pieces of equipment with extremely strong defensive power directly made up for Lion's shortcomings, and he put them on without hesitation. However, Leon felt that the crown of the Night King was too dazzling due to its kingly appearance. After all, Leon's official identity at this time was still the Commander-in-Chief of the Night's Watch, so Leon immediately made the crown of the Night King invisible, and the armor of immortality was replaced with the armor style of the current Commander-in-Chief of the Night's Watch. After putting on the armor of eternal life, Leon suddenly felt that the cold air that was raging around him all the time suddenly disappeared, as if there was an air conditioning facility installed in the armor that kept him warm in winter and cool in summer, although Leon's current endurance value of 30 points could withstand the cold. But no one likes to be cold, so Leon had to give a big thumbs up to this function of the eternal armor. On the summer sea, a fleet flying the crown and antler flag is floating on the sea. Davos Seaworth kept his eyes fixed on the sea, fearing that King Joffrey, who sat on the Iron Throne, would send a fleet to intercept him. At this time, Stannis had just reorganized an army of 1,000 cavalry with the help of the Iron Bank. Having lost the support of Dragonstone and even most of the lords of the Seven Kingdoms, Stannis can only rely on these 1,000 cavalrymen. According to Davos' plan, he must defeat and recruit the wildlings in order to regain the support of the major lords in the north. Then we can slowly plan for the Iron Throne. Speaking of which, the person who made the greatest contribution to this trip to Bravos was Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight. If he hadn't come out with a mouthful of words to convince the head of the Iron Bank when Stannis was speechless during his interrogation. Between Tywin Lannister, who is in his 60s or 70s and is getting old, and Stannis, who is 35 years old and in his prime, the Iron Bank had to choose the one who would be better able to control the Seven Kingdoms in the future. After some consideration, it finally lent Stannis a huge sum of money. Otherwise, Stannis might have to set foot on the Northern Territory empty-handed this time. In return, Stannis appointed Davos as his hand of the king. Is that Hardhome ahead? The gathering place of 100,000 wildlings. After a long journey on the sea, Stannis saw the coastline and asked Davos beside him. That's right, Your Majesty. If I defeat the wildlings, will the people of the north and even the Seven Kingdoms support me? When Stannis asked this question with a serious face and a somewhat worried tone, his hand of the king naturally knew what answer he wanted to hear. You must know that Sir Davos is not a flatterer. He said exactly what he thought. Your Majesty, you are the only legitimate king of the Seven Kingdoms, not just because of blood. It's because you are a man of honor and justice. The people of the North have always submitted to people with such character. Moreover, Robb Stark is dead. You only need to show them your consistent kingly demeanor, and they will naturally submit. Stannis obviously admires the sincerity and loyalty of an honest man like Davos, and is very pleased with his flattery. However, Stannis, who was naturally serious, did not show this emotion on his face. Instead, he pointed to the approaching coastline and said, "It seems that the savages here have never thought about defending against attacks from the sea. Moreover, the number of tents does not seem to match the figure of 100,000. After hearing this, Sir Davos quickly looked towards Hardhome with wide eyes. Although the savages of Hardhome noticed the dozens of ships that suddenly appeared on the sea, they did not show any panic or defensive response. Could it be a scam? As Stannis muttered to himself, his mind was also thinking rapidly, and from time to time he could hear a slight grinding sound. As a wise and qualified commander, after witnessing the abnormality of the wildlings, Stannis did not directly order his men to carry out a landing operation. Instead, they chose another beach where they could accumulate enough horsepower to land. Half an hour later, thousands of Dragonstone cavalry formed a charge formation on the beach. But before the charge began, two people walked out of the wildling camp of Hardhome side by side. One of them was a black knight with a white flag, while the other held an axe in both hands and strode towards Stannis's army with an arrogant look on his face. 4 legs are always faster than 2 legs, and the Black Knight arrived first. As Stannis's hand of the king, Davos saw that the visitor seemed to have no intention of fighting, so he rode forward and asked him his purpose. "My name is Jon Snow, son of Ned Stark, Chief Ranger of the Night's Watch. I recognize the royal banner in your army. Welcome to His Majesty Stannis Baratheon from Dragonstone." Jon's face was filled with a warm smile at this time, which made Davos a little confused for a moment. Although Davos did not know Jon Snow at this time, from the latter's accent and his impeccable aristocratic etiquette, it was obvious that his identity was not fake. But that was why he was even more confused. According to what Jon said, how could he, the Chief Ranger of the Night's Watch, appear here with a ferocious-looking wildling following behind him? Was he kidnapped by the wildlings? Or did he rebel and surrender to the wildlings? If it is the second reason, then Jon Snow is quite brave to come here alone to negotiate at this time. Just as Davos was confused about Jon's position at the moment, Stannis rode forward behind him and said calmly, "Jon Snow, I know your father. Your father is an honest, reliable, and respectable man. So I want to hear your explanation of why you are here." Just as Jon was about to explain to him that the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch had subdued these 100,000 wildlings and arranged for them to move south, Prince Olaf of Then, who had fallen behind, caught up in time. Seeing that Olaf was holding a weapon, Davos naturally did not dare to delay. He drew his sword and blocked his way. Dozens of Dragonstone cavalry suddenly rushed out from behind Stannis and surrounded Olaf. But he showed no fear at all, and even mocked, "Where did this southerner come from? Aren't you afraid of freezing your bird to death in this icy and snowy weather?" Davos never allowed anyone to insult his lord. Although he was not good at fighting, he immediately drew his sword, pointed at Olaf's neck and shouted, "Standing before you is the only legitimate king of the 7 kingdoms, king of the Andals, the Rhoynar and the First Men, and protector of the realm, Stannis Baratheon. Why don't you kneel and surrender?" After saying that, the surrounding Dragonstone cavalry instantly pointed their spears at Prince Olaf of Thurn. Judging from the posture, if he uttered the word no, dozens of transparent holes would be poked in his body on the spot. Unexpectedly, Olaf was a tough guy and was not threatened at all. "First of all, what you are wearing is inappropriate. Besides, this is not the territory of the 7 kingdoms. No one will recognize you as a king." Davos was furious when he heard this, and rode forward and said, "Kneeling is basic etiquette when surrendering to the king." Olaf immediately responded with a straightforward sentence, "Free people never kneel." After saying this, Olaf added in a low voice, "Even if you kneel to the southerners, you can't kneel twice." Seeing that Olaf was so stubborn, Stannis immediately lost his patience and waved his hand down, ordering his men to chop off Olaf's dog's head and then break into the Free People's camp. "Wait a moment, Your Majesty, I can explain. We must unite with the free folk." Seeing the situation getting out of control, Jon Snow immediately spoke out to stop it, but before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Stannis with a wave of his hand. "I'll listen to your explanation later. Come, take him down." The rest of you, follow me, and attack. After Stannis finished speaking, one of his men stepped forward to pull Jon Snow off his horse and control him, and the Dragonstone cavalry was about to launch an attack. Just as they were about to use Olaf's head as a sacrifice, the sound of a landslide and tsunami suddenly came from the ghost forest in the distance. Stannis decisively withdrew the previous order and ordered thousands of Dragonstone cavalry to turn their horses around and head towards the haunted forest. Could it be an ambush by the savages? Sir Davos had a solemn look on his face. He and Stannis had already noticed something unusual about the wildling camp. The only explanation at this moment was that the wildlings had calculated that they would land today, and would outflank the Dragonstone cavalry while attacking the wildling camp. However, after seeing the ambush rushing out of the ghost forest, the faces of the two suddenly changed. Taking advantage of today's rare cloudless weather, they were able to see clearly who rushed out. They were tall, pale, and haggard knights. With only dozens of them, they created an effect like a huge army charging at the same time. The Dragonstone cavalry, who had good eyesight, were so frightened when they saw the enemy's figure that they fell off their horses. The name of the tree that is the shadow of a human. The protagonist of the legend of winter coming that has been traversing the continent of Westeros for thousands of years, the White Walkers. The fear of facing this creature has long been deeply imprinted in the DNA of every living person. It's a White Walker. Davos was panic-stricken, and the horse under his crotch was frightened and out of control, almost throwing him off the horse. After he calmed his mount with difficulty, his face was suddenly filled with fear, and he hurriedly advised Stannis. Your Majesty, each White Walker is usually accompanied by a huge army of whites. The army of whites brought by these 50 White Walkers is definitely not something our 1,000 cavalry can defeat. The army is too late to board the ship, Your Majesty. Please retreat. I will lead the entire army to cover the rear. Stannis's face looked very ugly at this moment. He did not expect that after landing in Hardhome with so much difficulty, he would face the disaster of the White Walkers directly. Even if he escaped by chance, the 1,000 cavalrymen recruited with the loan from the Iron Bank would probably be wiped out by then. When Stannis thought about how his great cause of restoring his country had suffered such a setback at the very beginning, he roared to the sky. It seemed that he wanted to vent his dissatisfaction with the 7 gods through this long howl. When he was young, his parents died in a shipwreck, and from then on he no longer believed in the 7 gods. He had just made a comeback when the 7 gods once again played tricks on his fate. No. I will never retreat. Stannis responded to Davos's words of advice with a roar. However, after he shouted like this, many of the panicked Dragonstone cavalrymen around him seemed to have regained their backbone and hurriedly gathered around him. Stannis looked around at the faces of his men, some frightened, some afraid, some confused, some determined, and he shouted. Even if the enemy is a White Walker, so what? I am the king of the 7 kingdoms. I am Stannis of the Baratheon family. Fate. I will never bow to you. Everyone listen up, follow my army and charge. As Stannis finished speaking, he rushed out of the chaotic army formation, and Davos, who reacted soon after, waved his sword and shouted. Follow His Majesty and charge. At this time, even Jon Snow and Prince Olaf of Thurn were infected by the temperament of the king in front of them, and involuntarily joined the team rushing towards the White Walkers. The last few thousand strong free men rushed out of the wildling camp of Hardhome. The cowardly among them had already boarded the last ship of the day to Eastwatch, so no one fled when facing the attack of the White Walkers, and each of them rushed out to fight. Their families have been safely sent south of the wall, so every free man here has nothing to worry about, and they are determined to die with the White Walkers. The living were infected by Stannis, and everyone's face was filled with a spirit of sacrificing their lives. Stannis took the lead with a gnashing teeth expression on his face. In his eyes, there were only the White Walkers getting closer and closer. But he was so excited that he didn't notice the strange expression on the White Walker's face. Seeing a group of human cavalry charging towards him indiscriminately, the White Walker Dewang's eyebrows were immediately wrinkled into 8 characters, as if the word was written in capital letters on his face. Stannis was still charging with passion, and as the distance between him and the White Walkers got closer and closer, a hint of panic could not help but appear on his iron-hard face. You know, these are White Walkers. Before landing, Stannis was only prepared to fight the wildlings. If he knew there were White Walkers outside the wall, no matter how eloquent Davos was, he would not have agreed to go north to support the Night's Watch so readily. But Stannis' panic only lasted for a moment, and he suppressed it. The closer the situation is to life and death, the calmer one must be. Somehow, Stannis sensed that these White Walkers in front of him did not seem to have any intention of taking action. Along with dozens of White Walkers, it was Lyon and Benyon Stark behind him who appeared. Jon Snow, who was riding a horse and charging behind Stannis, thought he was seeing things. After seeing clearly that it was Lyon who emerged from the haunted forest, Jon Snow shouted, "Your Majesty! He is one of us!" After shouting, Jon Snow slowed down his horse to avoid accidentally hurting Lyon. "Nonsense! How can a White Walker be one of us? Even if they were one of us before, they are White Walkers now." Stannis ignored Jon's shouts behind him and continued to charge. However, he also saw that there were two black-clad cavalrymen standing in the middle of the White Walkers on the opposite side. Judging from their attire, they were definitely members of the Night's Watch. But how could someone who hangs out with the White Walkers be a living person? Thinking of this, Stannis decided to capture the king first, and pointed the sword in his hand directly at Lyon. However, Lyon now has a large number of White Walker minions by his side, as well as Benyon Stark as his personal guard, so Lyon doesn't need to do it himself. Benyon Stark quickly stands in front of Lyon. Before Stannis could react, Benyon Stark lifted the sword in his hand into the air. The rest of the White Walkers remained indifferent before receiving Lyon's orders. They just watched coldly as the human cavalry in front of them rushed to the front one after another. Since Stannis looked like he had fallen into the hands of the White Walkers, Davos quickly raised his sword and gave the order to stop the charge. They were afraid that their king would be accidentally injured in the melee. Unlike the solemn faces of the Dragonstone cavalry, Jon Snow's face showed mixed emotions. The good news is that Lyon, the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch, not only returned, but also brought back his uncle who had been missing for a long time and was believed to have been murdered. What worried him was that the two Night's Watchmen looked at him with strange expressions on their faces, and they were riding white horses that only White Walkers could ride. Especially his uncle Benyon Stark, who directly captured Stannis, who claimed to be the legitimate king. No matter how you look at it, these two people don't seem to be in the same camp as the living now. Davos. Leave me alone. Damn White Walker, let me go if you dare. Stannis fell into Benyon's hands like a child, his legs flapping in the air. He kept shouting, as if trying to anger the White Walkers and make Davos stop hesitating and continue the charge. But then Benyon Stark did as Stannis wanted and threw him to the ground. Just as Stannis was about to stand up and continue his charge, Lyon's voice rang out. "That's enough. We are the Night's Watch, and these White Walkers are my men. They won't hurt you." When Jon Snow heard this, a smile suddenly appeared on his mixed face. He bravely dismounted, and came to Lyon in front of a group of White Walkers, first identifying Lyon's skin color and eyes, and then said with surprise, "It's Lyon, you're still alive." Davos also quickly dismounted, helped Stannis up and walked aside, but it was indeed as the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch said. These White Walkers just stood there like wooden sculptures, without any movement. However, the two men looked cautious, and they were obviously unwilling to believe what Lyon said that the White Walkers would not harm them. "Jon, you seem to have grown a lot during the time I was away." As if to verify the reliability of Lyon's words, Benyon Stark rolled off his white horse and walked up to Jon. Looking at his uncle's thin face, his once sharp eyes were now full of concern, and Jon could no longer suppress the longing in his heart. He threw himself directly into Benyon Stark's arms, and the latter just stood there quietly, stroking his nephew's already slightly broad shoulders with his hand. Since this was in front of outsiders, Jon held back his tears and asked loudly, "What's going on? Uncle, Lyon, why are you with the White Walkers?" "It's a long story. Anyway, if the commander-in-chief hadn't saved me, I'm afraid these White Walkers would be our enemies today." Jon didn't understand Benyon's explanation, and he was too lazy to think about it. He just hugged his uncle Benyon Stark tightly. At this moment, he finally had time to think about the news from the south, and the sadness that he had hidden so deeply in the past could no longer be suppressed. Robb Stark and Lady Catelyn were murdered by the despicable Frey family. It is said that the two younger brothers Bran and Rickon who stayed in Winterfell were also killed by the Iron Islands Ironman raiders, and the two sisters who followed their father Ned Stark to take office were also trapped in King's Landing. Although the northern border is still vast, the people of the Wolf family have dwindled to the point where it seems that only the uncle and nephew are left. Watching the warm reunion scene between the uncle and nephew. After Stannis calmed down, he signaled Davos with his eyes to come forward and ask what was going on. At this time, the free folks in Hardhome and the cavalry from Dragonstone also surrounded Lion's dozens of White Walkers. So, Davos gained the confidence, walked past the two Starks who were immersed in the reunion atmosphere, and came to Lion. But this time, De Huang was very tactful and served as Lion's personal bodyguard. Its icy spear was placed in front of Davos, blocking his progress. However, Davos did not care about the White Walker's obstruction, because he did not intend to get too close to Lion before confirming his identity. Davos did his homework before going north, and the Night's Watch was now led by a frighteningly young boy. The appearance of Leon in front of him matched the legendary commander-in-chief who was only 16 years old, so he asked. "Are you the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Leon Victor, son of Vico Victor of the Riverbend?" Leon did not answer immediately, but looked at the palm of the person in front of him, then smiled and replied. "Yes, I know you, Sir Davos, the only man in the Seven Kingdoms who has done great service to his master but was sentenced to have his hand cut off." The 5 fingers of Davos' left hand were cut off, and the person who gave the order was the king he swore allegiance to at this time, Stannis Baratheon. During the War of the Usurper, Stannis was besieged in Storm's End by the Dragon army for more than a year, with starving people everywhere. It was he who smuggled a boat full of onions and pickled fish under the cover of night to break through the dragon's red wine fleet and blockade the castle to deliver supplies to Stannis. Thanks to this food, Storm's End was able to hold out until reinforcements arrived. Therefore, Stannis knighted Davos and gave him Cape Wrath as his territory. At the same time, as punishment for his previous smuggling crimes, 5 fingers on Davos' left hand had to be cut off. Davos submitted, but on the condition that Stannis carry out the execution himself, as he believed no one else was qualified. Stannis selected a butcher knife for the cut, and cut cleanly, and Davos later chose Seaworth as his new family name. Hardhome, originally the tent belonging to Mance Rayder, now has people from 3 camps sitting in it. In fact, if we count the White Walker De Huang holding an ice crystal spear behind Leon, then it should be 4 directions. As the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch and the king beyond the wall, Lion naturally sat in the main seat. The guest army leader Stannis Baratheon sat in the guest seat below. Before the meeting officially began, Olaf then took out the Free Folk's horn and formally handed it to Lion. "Commander-in-chief, I have fulfilled my mission and have recruited all the free people for you. Currently, there are still 3,000 combat soldiers in the entire hardship camp." After Olaf finished speaking and returned to his seat, Stannis raised his head silently. When he heard the number of 3,000 soldiers, his eyes revealed a strong ambition. The next person to speak was Jon Snow, representing the Night's Watch, who was currently leading the immigration work in Hardhome. After briefly explaining the progress of the work, he sat back next to Benyon Stark, as if he didn't want to be away from his uncle for a quarter of an hour. In front of Benyon Stark, the only relative in the entire north, Jon seemed to have regained the feeling of being a noble young man. "That is, if there is any problem, the family elders will take care of it, and you only need to be responsible for a peaceful life." During the time that Lion was away, Jon felt increasingly difficult to communicate with the free folk. Since the death of Mance Rayder, he couldn't even find a free folk leader with whom he could talk calmly. Since Benyon was still alive, Jon refused in every possible way. Finally, Lion could not resist his request and returned the title of Chief Ranger to Benyon Stark. "Your Excellency the Commander-in-Chief." After seeing Lion's men finish explaining what happened, Davos, the hand of the King of Dragonstone, couldn't help but stand up. However, Leon seemed to have already seen through what he wanted to say, and with just a raise of his hand, he successfully stopped him from speaking. "Sir Davos, His Majesty Stannis has travelled thousands of miles north to support the Night's Watch. As the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, I am deeply moved. How about this? Although the Night's Watch is not well off, the food and horses of your 1,000 cavalrymen will be counted on us, and we will also provide you with a month's worth of food and fodder for your 1,000 troops." In the original drama, Lion knew exactly why Stannis went north. Although this move accidentally saved Jon Snow, who was surrounded by wildlings, he had already resolved the conflict between the Night's Watch and the Free Folk at this time and did not need his rescue at all. Even Jon, the then Commander-in-Chief, rejected Stannis' subsequent request to recruit soldiers from the Night's Watch and the Free Folk and march south. There was no reason for Lion, who had a strong army, to agree. Davos seemed somewhat caught off guard by Lion's firm refusal. The honest man thought about it and felt that this trip north did not provide any substantial help to the Night's Watch except for almost causing a misunderstanding in the attack on Hardhome. Thinking of this, Even though Davos had thousands of reasons to convince Lion, he still seemed a little lacking in confidence at this moment. However, Davos's temporary silence does not mean that there are no other eloquent people under Stannis's command. Melisandre, the Witch of the Red God, is a beautiful woman with a heart-shaped face, blazing red eyes and flaming copper-red hair. She exudes a heat from her body, as if she were a burning flame. When she stood up gracefully in a gorgeous silk dress and walked into the center of the tent, her fiery red hair sparkled brightly under the night sky, like a bonfire in the darkness, instantly attracting the attention of everyone in the tent. The lustful Olaf stared at the ravine in front of Melisandre, as if the abyss had a great attraction to him. As Melisandre spoke with her head held high, revealing her snow-white neck, most people in the audience, including Olaf, did not even hear clearly what she had just said until she finished speaking. Jon was the same. He swallowed involuntarily, staring at Melisandre's face, and asked in a low voice. "Can you say that again?" If there were anyone on the field who could resist Melisandre's charming words with a hint of mental suppression, it would probably be only a few people like Leon. "In the fire, I saw your tragic fate. Only he, Lord Stannis, the reincarnation of Azor Ahai, born in the land of smoke and salt, can lead you to victory over the terrible evil and powerful forces. The cold winds are already blowing, and soon the long night will never end, unless the upright people muster the courage to uphold the faith of the flaming red heart." Benyon Stark obviously disdained Melisandre's preaching. He snorted coldly to wake up his nephew, and then asked. "What do you mean? Winter is coming, and your red god is more useful than our old gods." Melisandre did not care about or refute Benyon Stark's questioning of her beliefs. She just looked at him calmly and said. "We all have to make a choice, male or female, old or young, noble or ordinary, our choice is the same. We choose between light and darkness, good and evil. We choose between true God and false God. One country, one God, one king." When talking about the last king, Melisandre pointed her finger at Stannis under everyone's gaze. Stannis's face showed a little surprise, but it was immediately replaced with a tenacious, serious, and restrained expression. It was obvious that he deeply agreed with Melisandre's words and had a deep sense of mission. "Commander-in-Chief Lion." Melisandre suddenly turned around and faced Leon, with a hint of temptation in her eyes. That look seemed to be able to penetrate people's hearts. No healthy man could remain indifferent after being stared at by such eyes. "In the fire, I saw your future as a king who would end the troubled times." "King of what? Keep talking." Stannis was somewhat dissatisfied with Melisandre's half-sentence, and secretly asked in his heart. "Is he a servant? Or an opponent?" Melisandre thought carefully about it and recalled that one night when she was wandering on the sea, she received a revelation from the red god Arhillar. The prophecy did indeed mention Stannis on the Iron Throne, but the face of Stannis in her memory seemed wrong. In the alternation of light and dark, it seemed that the face of the person on the Iron Throne kept alternating between Stannis and Lion, and finally merged into one. Until the end, it seemed that the young face of Leon Victor stood up, and he looked at Melisandre, who was predicting this scene with a smile on his face. Melisandre widened her eyes when she woke up from her memories. She didn't understand how her memory could be wrong. But facing Stannis's constant questioning, Melisandre could only turn around and smile bitterly. "Of course it's you, the king's attendant. Of course, he is the attendant of your majesty." Stannis secretly breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Melisandre's answer. Although he did not notice, Melisandre, who had always believed in him, seemed to reveal some hesitation in her tone today. Melisandre was reluctant to admit it, but based on her existing memories, she had lied to Stannis with this sentence. Then she looked at Leon suspiciously, not understanding why the red god Arhillar would tamper with the contents of her memory. Could it be that the current commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch will be the one who sits on the Iron Throne in the future and ends the troubled times? How is that possible? He is a member of the Night's Watch. Once he has sworn an oath to serve the Night's Watch until his death, it is impossible for him to participate in the Game of Thrones in the Seven Kingdoms. Thinking of this, Melisandre calmed down. Although Leon looked at her with interest, it was only limited to the appreciation of beautiful things. Unlike other people, he didn't care even if his eyes were about to fall out and his saliva was dripping. "Hey, girl, are you interested in being my princess?" Olaf wiped the saliva from his beard with his hand, and then wiped it on his clothes carelessly. He stood up, staring at Melisandre intently, and spoke in a rather impudent tone. Faced with Olaf's open courtship, Melisandre simply smiled at him and didn't mind at all. But just because she doesn't mind doesn't mean Stannis can tolerate others' disrespect for his princess. Stannis slapped the armrest and stood up. Davos spoke before his lord got angry. Commander-in-Chief, we are here to discuss important matters, not to attend a blind date convention. You can ask your men to withdraw. Davos is a devout believer in the seven gods, and therefore is disgusted by Stannis's conversion to believe in the Lord of Light under Melisandre's instigation. However, Melisandre's persuasion played a big role in Stannis's journey north, and even if Davos is unwilling, he has to speak up to help Melisandre out. His Majesty Stannis originally wanted to support the Night's Watch in exchange for their help. Right now, the Seven Kingdoms are in chaos. We need the full support of the Night's Watch and even the Free Folk to defeat the usurper Tywin Lannister, the Warden of the West. We can't just give them food and fodder to get rid of them. After listening to Davos's words, Lyon just looked at him without comment, and then slowly asked. As you can see, you are late. There are no enemies here anymore. We have eliminated the threats from the Free Folk and even the White Walkers. What reason do we have to participate in the Game of Thrones in the Seven Kingdoms? Moreover, it has been a rule since ancient times that the Night's Watch does not get involved in disputes between kings. After saying that, Lyon waved at Olaf, who looked at Davos defiantly, raised two healthy fingers in provocation, and sat back in his seat without saying a word. However, Melisandre was obviously interested in Olaf's personality. She walked up to Olaf and even sat on his lap in front of everyone. She lifted Olaf's hairy chin with her slender fingers and said, "I'm so proud of you. You are a capable man, would you mind converting to the faith of the Lord of Light? I will let you have me." Listening to Melisandre's words full of implications, Olaf nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Seeing that her charm was still ineffective, Melisandre turned her head and looked provocatively at Lyon and Benyon Stark, who were indifferent to her. The reason why Benyon Stark was indifferent was that he had been a Night's Watchman for half his life and would not be easily seduced by beauty. Lyon already knew Melisandre's true appearance through the TV series. No matter how beautiful this woman was, once he learned that her real age might be over 200 years old, little Lyon would definitely be dejected and tremble. Stannis seemed a little angry about Melisandre seducing another man in front of him. He drew the long sword at his waist and stabbed it heavily into the campfire in the middle of the camp, splashing large sparks and attracting everyone's attention. And he himself, as if he could not feel the burning pain, held the sword which was gradually burning red, and finally when he pulled the sword out of the campfire, the entire sword was surrounded by a blazing nameless fire. Inside the tent, all the Free Folk were stunned by the superb acrobatic performance of the king from the south, as if the air was filled with the smell of burnt flesh at Stannis's hands. And Olaf, a man who was extremely obsessed with the flesh and blood of kings, stared at Stannis's palm intently, as if he was appreciating an extremely tempting delicacy. "Last night, I gazed into the hearth and saw what was in the flames. I saw a king with a crown of fire on his brow, burning, burning. Davos." As he spoke, Stannis pointed the flaming sword of light at his hand of the king. "Indeed, I should have come earlier, and perhaps I would not have come at all if my hand had not reminded me. Lord Seaworth, though of humble origins, reminded me of my duty. At the time, I was obsessed with power. Davos was right, I put the cart before the horse, seeking the throne to save the country. This was putting the cart before the horse. I should have saved the country first, and then won the throne." Stannis was unwilling to leave empty-handed. He looked at Lyon with a fierce look in his eyes. "Since you claim to uphold the rules of the kingdom, then I demand your unconditional support for me. Otherwise, as the legitimate king of the Seven Kingdoms, I have the right to judge you for your crimes." Stannis's words undoubtedly broke off relations with Lyon, the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. The atmosphere in the tent suddenly became tense. The knights from Dragonstone guarded Stannis on both sides, while Olaf and other free folk suddenly stood up and surrounded Stannis and his group with axes in hand. Seeing this, Lyon smiled, stood up and asked leisurely. "I wonder, Your Majesty, which law of the kingdom have I violated? You allowed these wildlings to go south and rest in the new land without the legal order of the king and the Warden of the North. This is undoubtedly a betrayal of the oath of the Night's Watch and a violation of the laws of the kingdom." Stannis sneered. His words, which seemed to be in a righteous position, made many of the Night's Watchmen present feel uneasy. To this day, half of the Night's Watch still resists and does not understand Lyon's order to let the wildlings go south. The saying "those who are not of my kind must have different hearts" applies everywhere, not to mention that the ratio of the number of Night's Watch to that of wildlings is nearly 100 times. It was difficult for the Night's Watch to understand the role of the free folk horn to the wildlings, and they were unwilling to believe that such a small object could buy loyalty. Seeing that the atmosphere was not right because of his lord's words, Davos quickly stepped forward to smooth things over. Lord Commander, His Majesty Stannis means that your support is too little. In any case, 1,000 men a month's supply is definitely not enough. Seeing Davos come out to smooth things over, Melisandre also walked slowly towards Stannis. She waved her hand and extinguished the flames on the Sword of Light. At the same time, under her tender gaze, the anger in Stannis' heart was also extinguished. His Majesty. Davos looked at Stannis with a meaningful look, and then guided him to look at the wildlings in the tent. As a king and his subject who had lived together day and night for more than 10 years, they could understand each other's meaning through their eyes even without saying a word. Stannis looked at Olaf, then at the other wildlings in the camp, including the giant Strongamar who had remained silent, and finally nodded imperceptibly. With Stannis's permission, Davos waved his hand and ordered the Knights of Dragonstone to sheath their swords. He continued to speak to Lion. Commander-in-Chief, we have a suggestion. Since most of these barbarians have already crossed the wall, it would be time-consuming and laborious to capture them all. Why don't you allow us to recruit soldiers from among the barbarians? Once your Majesty regains the throne, you can put forward any conditions. Faced with the blank check from Stannis, it is obvious that no child would make the wrong choice. Just as Lion was about to refuse, Davos quickly added. His Majesty has allowed the families of the wildlings who participated in the war to stay south of the wall. In Davos's opinion, the conditions he offered were not bad enough to violate the rule that wildlings could not go south. The newly added land is a gift from the Northern Guard to the Night's Watch. As the Commander-in-Chief of the Night's Watch, I should have the final say on how to deal with it, right? Davos' words did not impress Lion at all. The latter was even bored to the point of dozing off with his chin propped up. If there is no king to endorse your actions, you will be spurned by every lord in the 7 kingdoms. When the time comes, no one will be willing to support the wall when it encounters a disaster, not to mention. Davos glanced at the White Walker Rhubarb beside Lion. Even from a distance he could feel the cold aura emanating from Rhubarb all the time. What's more, winter is coming, and the entire north will face the threat of food shortage and the White Walkers. After Davos finished speaking, Lion listened for a while, and after making sure that he didn't say anything new, he gave his own answer. First of all, regarding your last point, it is true that winter is coming, but the Night King and I are good friends. We signed a truce agreement. At least, this treaty is still in effect while I am still the Commander-in-Chief. Secondly, regarding the food problem, I will arrange a fleet to purchase food from the free trade city-state on the other side of the Summer Sea. You don't have to worry about that. Seeing that Davos still had something to say. Even his powerful mouth cannon, Lion, quickly waved his hand to stop him, and looked at Stannis and said. When Grand Maester Aemon sent out the ravens, I had no hope of aid from the kingdom, but I am grateful that you have come. But you should understand that I am not only the Commander-in-Chief of the Night's Watch, but also the leader of these 100,000 free people. They chose me as their new king beyond the wall, which means I must be responsible for every one of them. I have no current plans to send any of my freemen to participate in this civil strife in the kingdom. The Night Fort is still empty. You and your 1,000 cavalry can be stationed there. If you have any problems with food and fodder, you can always go to Jon Snow, my new chief steward. Also, Your Majesty Stannis, you don't have to fleece me. You can just make a statement. I believe there are many families in the north who do not obey Roose Bolton, the Guardian of the North. Moreover, there are many mountain clans in the north who do not obey the king. You can go to these tribes to recruit mercenaries. When Leon finished speaking these words in one breath, even Davos, the famous expert in talking nonsense in Westeros, didn't think there was anything wrong with it at first. After all, Lion was kind enough to provide the army with a place to station and food, and pointed out a clear way forward. There was no point in forcing him to join the war. But Stannis didn't think so. He always believed that Lion didn't do enough for his cause of restoring his country, and thought it was Lion's contempt for himself. So Stannis snorted coldly, and the anger in his heart was obviously showing signs of rekindling. Fortunately, Melisandre in front of him whispered something to him and calmed him down. Stannis was somewhat moved by Melisandre's suggestion, and pointed to the free people in the account book and said, Since you suggested that I recruit mercenaries, are there any free citizens willing to participate? You can refer to Davos. I am never stingy with rewards. As Stannis spoke, Melisandre cast an ambiguous look at Prince Olaf of Then and other free folk leaders. Even if Melisandre didn't pay any price, but just intentionally or unintentionally revealed a little charm under her long skirt, it was enough to make Olaf and other free folk leaders stunned. However, without Leon's order, Olaf and others felt very uncomfortable in their seats and could not sit still. Haha, Olaf, you want to save my rations? Then go ahead. After hearing what Lion said, Olaf, the most powerful warrior among the free folk, stood up in an instant. The Thane tribe is involved. But I don't want any reward, I just want this woman to accompany me for one night. Melisandre had long since taken Stannis under her wing, and he was immediately furious when he heard such a rude remark, but before he could get angry, Melisandre whispered to him. As a follower of the Red God Arhillar, what does a small price mean? As long as I can win the throne for you, I will do anything. Melisandre's words calmed Stannis's angry heart in time. After calming down for a long time, he finally nodded and tolerated Olaf's offense. Then Stannis gave Lion a provocative look and said something divisive. As far as I know, the Flade family, the Frey family, and their instructors, the Lannister family, have committed a heinous crime of genocide against the Stark family. Can the two Starks present here remain indifferent? Dragonstone has been the seat of the Crown Prince since the Targaryen family took control of Westeros. This may not have been what Robert Baratheon had in mind when he appointed Stannis as the Duke of Dragonstone. So as a Crown Prince, Stannis has enough brains and means, but he just doesn't bother to use them on a daily basis. Davos was obviously not qualified to say such divisive words, only he was qualified. So, after he finished speaking, Jon and Benyen's faces changed drastically. The two Starks, whose thoughts were revealed by Stannis, reacted differently. After hearing these words, Benyen Stark, who had already died once, naturally had enough composure. So he just revealed a hint of sadness between his brows and then suppressed this emotion in his heart. Because when this strong man learned of the fate of his brother and even his nephews, his tears had already dried up. At this time, his duty as a night watchman reminded him all the time not to be impulsive. Even though he wanted to draw his sword and behead Roose Bolton of the Dread Fort, Valder Frey of Riverrun, and Tywin Lannister of Casterly Rock, he couldn't. At least without Lion's order, he could not break his oath and go south without permission. Grand Maester Aemon claims that every man of the Night's Watch has had their loyalty tested at least once. Aemon says he has been tested 3 times, and this time, Benyen Stark's first, is a vow he will never break. But Jon Snow does not have the same strong willpower as his uncle. He jumped up when he heard the news from Stannis' own mouth. Jon's eyes were red at this moment. He had been tormented by this news all the time these days, but he resisted the urge to go south regardless of everything and tried his best to numb himself with busy work. Stannis' words were undoubtedly a fatal blow to him who was caught off guard. Then Jon's whole body tensed up, his hands twitched uncontrollably, and then he raised his head with a grim expression, as if he didn't want anyone to see his expression at this moment. He wanted to yell at Stannis, "Take me! I want to avenge my father and Lady Catelyn, and my brothers and sisters." But as a night watchman with the same duties, he could only endure the anger silently and remain indifferent like his uncle. Just then, Jon felt a pair of warm and strong hands patting his shoulders. He turned around mechanically and saw Leon's expressionless face. Jon Snow really wants to say that he will not abandon his post, nor will he violate the oath of the Night's Watch and participate in Stannis' battle for the throne as a mercenary. But these words were too against his will and he couldn't say them at all. "Don't say anything. I have a task for you." Lion looked at Jon expressionlessly, and Stannis behind him also smiled at the right moment, as if his conspiracy had succeeded. He knew that once Jon Snow intervened in his war, it would be difficult for the Night's Watch to remain neutral. At that time, Lion and these 100,000 savages would have to be tied to his chariot even if they were unwilling. What mission? Jon didn't understand what task Leon would give him at this time. Could it be that he followed Stannis south? How could that be possible? Doing so would violate the oath of the Night's Watch to stay neutral and not get involved in the affairs of the kingdom. Euron the Wavecrow has been missing for many days since the Battle of Black Iron Castle. Without him, there is no one to recruit new soldiers and collect food for the Legion, so the Night's Watch Corps cannot let the position of Wavecrow remain vacant for too long. After hearing what Lion said, Jon's face was full of disbelief, as if he had a premonition of what Lion would say next. "You will take over Euron's duties and follow His Majesty Stannis." I believe that the war he is about to launch will bring a group of prisoners to the Legion and fill the wall. Your mission is to bring all of them back. After listening to Lion's words, John verified his guess, and his red eyes gradually regained a bit of clarity. Me? Can I? John was now considering how dangerous it would be for him, a member of the Stark family, to travel in the north controlled by Roose Bolton. But no matter how difficult the road ahead was, he was determined to go and find a suitable time to go around to the Dread Fort to see if he could assassinate Roose Bolton. The people of the north only recognize the Stark family. I believe that with John's help, it will be much easier for His Majesty Stannis to convince the major lords of the north. Seeing that John was interested, Davos spoke up at the right time. Don't worry. Once I catch Roose Bolton, I'll give you the chance to kill him yourself. Stannis's words served as the final word. Not only did John no longer have any worries after hearing them, but even the mature and steady Benyon Stark was almost tempted to replace his nephew as Raven. Lion also added, pretending to be deaf and dumb. John, you only need to take over the prisoners from both sides after the war. Remember that the Night's Watch must not participate in the war of either side, so as to avoid giving people an excuse to criticize you. The talks ended successfully. Lion also told the free folk that those who did not want to leave their hometown could return. He had reached an agreement with the Night King, and even the Thens could return to the royal city occupied by the Night King. Unexpectedly, the wildlings seemed to be frightened by the White Walkers and refused to go back no matter what. What's more, the long night is approaching, and the weather north of the Great Wall is getting colder day by day. Crops have failed, and wild beasts have gone into hibernation. This land simply cannot support the survival of the free people. Therefore, the last group of strong free folk left in Hardhome joined Stannis's fleet and headed south to Eastwatch by the sea. In the end, all that was left of Hardship Village were empty tents. Just as the last person boarded the ship, suddenly, a fiery red meteor streaked across the sky. It seemed like a scar on the sky, rapidly moving towards the north. To the horror of all the free folk, Night's Watchmen, and even the Dragonstone cavalry on board, Melisandre, wearing a dark red dress, stood at the bow, frowning and muttering to herself. Winter has arrived. It seemed as if the heaven and earth were responding to her words. A storm suddenly arose on the sea, and the sky was filled with heavy rain mixed with flying snow, which equally chilled everyone standing on the deck to observe the meteors. Fortunately, the fleet sailed south along the coastline and was able to avoid the raging storm raging on the sea in the distance. In the end, only one large ship was stranded on the seashore after its sails were damaged by the storm. Stannis's fleet managed to bring back ships full of terrified people. 3 days later, Lion set foot on the land of Donghai again. The storm at sea gradually subsided, but the blizzard became more and more severe. The once dilapidated Donghai has now become a replica of the Hardship Village. Rows of tents are stationed in the vast land south of Donghai. Freemen, young and old, braved the wind and snow to walk out of their tents to find food for the day for their families, while night watchmen in black moved among them to maintain order. However, despite the harsh environment, conflicts still occurred from time to time between free people from different tribes. The corpses of those who died in battle, froze to death, or starved to death were carried out of the tents one by the free people with numbness written all over their faces and gathered together to be burned. This burning sight left a huge scar with a diameter of hundreds of meters on the ground, witnessing the hardships and pain experienced here. Commander-in-Chief, it seems that your level of territory construction is slightly inferior to your military capabilities. After getting off the ship, Stannis witnessed the chaotic scene in front of Eastwatch and mocked Lion mercilessly. Although Stannis's ability to govern his territory is not very good, he also has his say. Where is his fiefdom, Dragonstone? The place was sparsely populated and barren, and the people there could only make a living by catching fish, shrimps, and crabs. Apart from the rich dragon crystal minerals buried under the land and several fortresses and temples built by the Long family, the place is pitifully poor. So naturally he doesn't have much experience in governing, and there is no need for him to understand these things. Therefore, Stannis was naturally confident in blaming Lion. Currently, Eastwatch is home to almost all of the Night's Watch, and even Castle Black has been nearly abandoned. If not, just to take care of the daily living needs of the 100,000 savages, the dozens of night watchmen in Eastwatch would find it difficult to cope even if they worked to their limits. Lion saw the refugee camp that was like hell on earth and walked in without saying a word. At the door of the tent, a Night's Watch oath-sworn holding a two-handed sword was stationed there. His cloak was covered in mud and he had no time to wash it. His tough face was full of fatigue. When he saw Leon and others getting off the boat, his empty eyes seemed to finally light up. Commander-in-Chief. Samuel, how did you end up like this? What Lion didn't expect was that the person guarding the Freeman's camp would be Sam. Even though Leon hadn't seen him for a long time, he was still shocked by the change in him. If you ignore his tired face, you will find that Sam's temperament has changed dramatically. His original body of 200 to 300 kilograms has become as slim as a normal person. This is due to the genetic genes of the military family Tully, which makes his body look like it has been carved by a knife and an axe. Because of long-term use of two-handed swords, his arms are stronger than others, but this is not fat, but solid muscles formed by long-term exercise. His originally good-looking face looked even more heroic after he lost weight, but the worry between his brows diluted the heroic look. Leon used the troop function on the panel to check Sam's attributes and was immediately shocked. Unknowingly, Sam had surpassed the ability of a 6th-level global defender and advanced to a Lord-level hero. My Lord Commander, Lord Spithuam has gone to Grey Crow Village to arrest the wildlings who have escaped. Grand Maester Iman is leading half of the Night's Watch to make lime to curb the plague, and the remaining half has been sent out to find food. I am the most useless one, and I can only guard the gate. Sam sounded aggrieved as he spoke, and his eyes even showed that he was blaming Leon for making the decision without thinking. Commander-in-Chief, are you not prepared to receive these 100,000 savages heading south? Davos, who was standing by, couldn't help but ask when he saw the miserable situation in the camp. Olaf, let me ask you, when Mansraider gathered 100,000 wildlings, did he not think about raising enough food and fodder? After listening to Davos' question, Lion immediately looked at Olaf with a fierce look, as if the other party didn't answer him correctly, Lion would turn into a then berserker. Feeling the boundless murderous intent from Leon, even the cannibalistic Olaf was trembling with fear at this moment, and replied with sweat dripping down his face. My Lord Commander, Mansraider has indeed prepared enough food. However, Olaf only said half of his words before his eyes flickered and he dared not look at Leon. Go on. When Leon saw Olaf's evasive look when he spoke, he became furious and kicked him directly. Olaf then finished the rest of his words in one go. After finally escaping to the south of the Great Wall, many people took all the food and continued to flee further south. Some people ate and drank as if they had survived a disaster. In addition, the giants were particularly good at eating and drinking. The food that Mansraider had originally prepared for 100,000 people for a month didn't even last a week. As Olaf spoke, he lowered his head in shame. Sam was a soft-hearted person, and he quickly stopped Leon who was about to get angry and said, Commander-in-Chief, our food reserves can actually last for a while, but there was a problem with the allocation, and those free people started snatching food. How long can this last? Leon's sudden question interrupted Sam's thoughts. He recalled the size of the storage room in his mind, opened his mouth, and replied after a long time. I have no idea. You don't know? As someone who dreams of becoming a bachelor, you would say you don't know. Leon was almost laughing at Sam's honesty. As a captain who once owned a ship, Davos had some experience he wanted to share with Lion. But before he could say anything, Stannis stopped him in time and warned him to shut up with his eyes. But Leon didn't care about the little tricks between the king and his subject, but stretched out his hand to Sam and said, Take the account book. Sam decisively took out a leather-covered notebook from his pocket and handed it to Leon. Leon just glanced at the content and asked with obvious dissatisfaction. Only one. Yes, the expenses were recorded, but since we received so many freedmen at once, we were short-handed and overwhelmed, so a lot of it was not recorded. The account book that Sam handed over was so disorganized that it gave people a headache to read. It was impossible to accurately determine any useful information from it. How do you usually distribute supplies? Finally, Leon pinched his sore temples and said weakly. If someone comes to ask for it, give it to them. Sam's answer was extremely frank and sounded simple, but it made Leon feel deeply powerless from the inside out. Just as Sam was about to explain something, Leon waved his hand, and the former tactfully shut his mouth and prepared to be scolded. However, seeing the devastated Freeman refugee camp, Lion no longer had the energy to get angry. Sam, take me to the storeroom to count the supplies left. Also, Olaf, go to all the chiefs in the United Camp and tell them that all free people have 1 day to return. Anyone who exceeds this deadline will be considered a wildling. If you catch them, you will be sent to build the Great Wall for me. Olaf set out at once to seek out the chieftains and elders of the camp. "Lord Commander? What can I do?" John, who had been unable to get a word in, asked hurriedly. "I have an important task for you. Go and collect the minimum daily food needs of 10 free families, and then give me the median value." "You don't understand what the median value is." Stannis originally treated Lion as a laughing stock. After all, anyone who took over such a mess would have a headache. However, what surprised him was that Lion did not seek help from himself or any other scholar, but resolutely handled the civil affairs himself. Moreover, seeing that he issued orders in an orderly manner, he could not help but put away the mocking look on his face. Lion's office was not located in the garrison captain's tower in Eastwatch, nor in the territory of the Free People. Instead, they set up a few tables at the door of the storage room. Without exception, all the literate nobles among the Night Watch were pulled by Lion to sit quietly at the table and work as clerks. Although Lion's management level is only at the cognitive level of an ordinary high school student. But as a modern man, Leon lives in a well-ordered society, and is naturally influenced by what he sees and hears, and has a vision that transcends this era. Besides, Lion usually watches a lot of short videos and learns a lot of knowledge. Although it is not comprehensive, it is enough to deal with the current situation. "Commander-in-Chief, I don't understand the account book you made." Sam pointed at the grid-like table that Leon had hand-drawn, and was confused for a moment. But Leon was too busy drawing lines to answer him, so Sam tactfully stood behind Leon and watched. But then, after Leon filled in the name of the items, quantity, input and output items, summary, and other units into the form, Sam suddenly felt as if a light had been turned on. Even the illiterate Sir Davos felt that the columns of data in the account book in front of him were well organized, which was simpler than the original account book that only used paragraphs of text to record the income and expenditure, and had to go through the whole book from the beginning every time he looked through it. After Lion roughly filled in a few items, he handed the rest of the work to Sam, who was eager to try. Sam immediately took out a form and filled in the data in the original account book one by one. The originally boring calculation work suddenly became much simpler. Even the literate nobles who had never been exposed to these gold and silver calculations could easily get started. "My Lord Commander, I have finished the statistics." As they were talking, John came over with a list that recorded the daily supplies needed by 10 free families. Lion frowned, and the number of supplies in the storage room was just counted at this time. Lion made a rough comparison between the median daily needs of 10 freedmen's households and the total number of supplies. At the same time, after doing some mental calculations, he said, "At present, these supplies can only last Donghai for 2 months before widespread famine occurs." After hearing Lion say that the stored grain would be available in 2 months, many of the busy and overwhelmed Night's Watch nobles breathed a sigh of relief. But the prerequisite is that every ration must be distributed according to this minimum standard. Leon pointed to a number on the list showing the amount of food needed per person. Each adult was given a piece of black bread, a small piece of fish and butter every day, while women and children had half that. "Just give them this little to eat? If they don't have enough to eat, won't these free people rebel?" A noble of the Night's Watch was immediately terrified when he saw the numbers. Leon said ruthlessly, "Rebellion? They don't dare. If any of them feel hungry, they can go out and find a way out themselves." Lion's words were very cold. After giving reasonable management measures in a quick and decisive manner, Stannis also sensed in Lion the demeanor that a superior should have. This forces Stannis to ignore Lion's age and treat him as an equal. In fact, Lion has another way, which is to recruit all these 100,000 savages as his subordinates. In this way, Lion's new panel skill management theory will automatically come into play, and the system will supply their daily needs. But there is a limit to the number of troops that Lion can command. Currently, he can only lead a maximum of 1,000 soldiers. It is obvious that the system is unwilling to let Lion take advantage of this loophole. "It seems that my appearance is very timely and can relieve your logistical pressure." Stannis folded his arms and walked up to the somewhat anxious Lion, with a slight smile on his lips. "I will recruit enough strong wildlings to go south. If they stay in Eastwatch, they will eventually turn into rioting hungry people. It is better for me to take them all away and let them be consumed in the war. After all, they are not the people of the 7 kingdoms." When Stannis said this, there was no free folk around, but all the Night's Watch who heard this cast complicated glances at him. John looked at Stannis in disbelief, and then asked in a trembling voice, "Your Majesty, you won't use these free people as cannon fodder, will you?" "Why not? Commander Lion, give me enough food and fodder to support these people to reach the dread fort, and I will solve these problems for you during the siege. Stannis speaks as if he is using the free folk he recruits like the whites driven by the White Walkers. These words resonated with some of the Night's Watch nobles who were originally dissatisfied with the free people. They could not stand the fact that these free people came to their land so openly and took root there. However, there are also some sympathetic night watchmen who believe that the long night has arrived and that every bit of strength of the living should not be wasted easily. After all, the free people came here to seek refuge with the consent of Commander-in-Chief Lion. Even if they did not agree with this decision in their hearts, it was not the turn of the King of Dragonstone to decide the life and death of these free people. What's more, the Night's Watch has already provided food and salt to the free people. This action is undoubtedly a violation of the guest's rights set by the sacred gods. Davos noticed that the Night's Watchmen around him were looking at his lord with strange eyes, so he quickly stood up and stood in front of Stannis. You may have misunderstood your Majesty's words. We will undoubtedly make good use of these strong freemen in the coming war. Your Majesty, I must warn you that you cannot take the throne if you lead a group of foreigners. An elderly Night's Watch nobleman stood up, said this to Stannis, snorted coldly, and left. However, Stannis did not mind this man's disrespect. He then walked to Lion's desk, placed his hands on the desk, and said to Lion in a coercive manner. I wonder how many wildling warriors you are willing to support me, Lord Commander-in-Chief, or King beyond the wall. Lion stood behind the table, facing the aggressive Stannis, and said in a neither humble nor arrogant tone. Although I don't mind my freemen joining the war as mercenaries, the number of them depends on what price your Majesty is willing to pay. Stannis understood the hidden meaning of Lion's words very well, and he immediately pointed to Jon Snow. How about him as the Guardian of the North? When Jon heard Stannis's promise, he was stunned at first, without any joy on his face. Then he sighed and said, Your Majesty, I am a night watchman, and I am only a bastard. You have the blood of the Stark family flowing in your body. Besides, I am a king. Your illegitimate status will naturally be made official after I conquer the North. As for the Night's Watch oath, I don't think it's necessary for Lord Commander Lion to embarrass a future Guardian of the North, right? Stannis made no secret of his ambitions in front of the Night's Watch. Guardian of the North, can you take it out? Lion chuckled and looked at Stannis calmly, without commenting. If I unite the Seven Kingdoms, I don't mind changing Jon's last name to Stark as long as he swears allegiance to me. Stannis adjusted his armor, his posture as proud as a true king. Several high-ranking members of the Night's Watch around Lion had different reactions to the news. Most people looked at Stannis with anger on their faces. They obviously disagreed with Jon, a Night's Watcher, breaking his oath and becoming the Guardian of the North. Such a precedent had not been set in thousands of years, not even during Aegon's conquest. But a small number of people calculated the economic accounts. If Jon could really become the protector of the North, then much more support would be given to the Night's Watch. They were not dissatisfied with the support provided by the former Guardian of the North, Ned Stark. It was an indisputable fact that Ned had done his best to provide supplies and manpower for the Night's Watch. However, compared to Ned, having Jon, one of their own, as the Guardian of the North would undoubtedly bring more benefits. Looking at the Night's Watch leaders who were in a state of disagreement, Stannis's face showed a calm and steady look as if he had mastered the matter. It was as if he was born to be an outstanding king, worthy of being the heir appointed by his brother Robert before his death. He had the ability and determination to quell the civil strife in the kingdom and lead his subjects through this long and difficult night. Let's put this matter aside for now. Why not wait until you conquer the North? Finally, Lion gave his own answer. He could see that if he didn't give an explanation, Jon Snow might really start to consider the possibility of becoming the Guardian of the North. Okay, then I'll go to the Savage camp to recruit soldiers. Having said this, Stannis was about to turn and leave. Wait, Lord Stannis. As the king beyond the wall, I want to give you a piece of advice. Explain. Since you have decided to recruit freemen as your soldiers, you should give them the respect they deserve. It is inappropriate to use the word savages to refer to my men, as it may have a derogatory connotation. Faced with Lion's advice, which was neither soft nor hard, Stannis showed a hint of arrogance on his face, then snorted coldly and turned away. After Stannis and Davos, master and servant, completely disappeared from the sight of the Night's Watch. The top brass of the Night's Watch were completely furious. A high-ranking member of the Night's Watch who was close to Benyon Stark slammed the table and yelled. In short, I absolutely disagree with John participating in the southern expedition, and I don't want him to be the warden of the north. Seeing someone take the lead, the other night watchmen also started talking. I think the chips given by the second son of the Lu family are not small. Not small? He is just being generous to others. The Northland has not fallen into the hands of his Lu family yet. Is that Skinner family easy to mess with? Yes, we have less than 300 people in the Night's Watch at present. If the King of Dragonstone fails in his southern expedition, how can we resist the troops of the Duke of Casterly Rock? These 100,000 barbarians who only eat for free are enough to give us a headache. Anyway, we should release a message to the whole territory as soon as possible that we, the Night's Watch, always remain neutral. Faced with everyone's discussions, the person involved, Jon Snow, looked at Lion with a complicated expression, trying to get support from him. After all, some time ago, Lion had promised him that he would serve as a raven and follow Stannis' army to recruit prisoners of war to enrich the Night's Watch. If Leon changes his mind at this moment and he can't go, how can he avenge his family? But Jon was obviously overthinking it. Lion coughed lightly, stopped everyone's discussion, and said to Jon under the attention of all the Night's Watchmen. Jon, your mission will proceed as usual, but remember one thing, the disputes of the Seven Kingdoms have nothing to do with us. If anyone dares to hinder you from completing your mission, it will be a provocation to the entire Night's Watch. Go. Seeing that Lion supported him so firmly, Jon felt indescribable joy in his heart. He immediately picked up Longclaw and followed Stannis in recruiting soldiers. Lord Commander? What if Roose Bolton misunderstands our neutral attitude of the Night's Watch? After Jon left, a Night's Watchman asked Leon hesitantly. However, Leon did not reply to him immediately. Instead, he looked at him with a disdainful look and asked calmly. The Night's Watch does not need anyone else's instructions on what to do. Hearing Lion's tough attitude, many Night Watchmen sighed inwardly. Only Benyon Stark, the Night's Watcher who had witnessed Lion killing hundreds of thousands of White Walkers with ease, smiled throughout the whole process and did not speak. Inside the Free Folk camp, a large area was cleared by the Dragonstone cavalry and a high platform was built. This move quickly attracted the hatred of many free people, but it also had an advertising effect. Davos looked at his lord helplessly, then stepped onto the platform and spoke to the tens of thousands of free people below. You, the descendants of our ancestors, now live in the Northern Territories, where your life is in danger. Davos's words caused an uproar among the free folk, but it was obvious that this was an effect Davos had intended. Who gave you land? Who gave you food? Who gave you hope? Davos asked these three questions in a roaring tone, immediately suppressing the chaotic voices of the free people. But then, a bigger commotion came. Is this the guidance of the old gods? No, it's Leon Victor, the Crow leader. No, it's the new king beyond the wall. Disagreements were evident among the freemen. But Davos then used all his strength to point to Stannis who was slowly walking up to the platform. It's your king. Stannis Baratheon of Dragonstone. As Stannis walked to the front of the stage, he stood proudly in full helmet and armor, with a look of arrogance in his eyes. The answer given by Davos obviously did not convince the free people in the audience. Several of the nearby Thorn berserkers spat at the stage with disdain on their faces, and one of the spit hit the face of a Dragonstone trooper who was responsible for the security of the lecture below the stage. The cavalryman was immediately furious and drew his sword and rushed forward, while the Thorn berserker also showed his axe without showing any weakness. The two sides immediately caused quite a commotion in the audience. Follow me. I will give you land. Give you food. Give you the glory of invincibility. It must be said that Stannis was ruthless when it came to being in the spotlight, and his roar after drawing his sword immediately stopped the riot, and everyone's eyes turned to him. 1,000 Dragonstone cavalrymen shouted along with Stannis's actions, their faces full of fanaticism. Faced with 1,000 fanatical Dragonstone cavalrymen in distinctive armor, the free folk could not help but feel doubtful and uncertain, but many of them calmed down and watched it all coldly. Seeing that the mood was right, Davos took a few steps forward to stand beside Stannis and continued to ask loudly. Do you want to freeze to death here, or are you willing to follow His Majesty the King to the south and seize the land of the southern rebels? Finding a way out of war is a choice that every nation will make, and free people are no exception. Many people made their own choice, stay in the north and freeze or starve to death, or follow a king from the south to fight. Stannis is gone, his next destination being the Night Fort. After all, it will take time for the army to march south. After recruiting a lot of free militia from Lion, Stannis urgently needs to transform these free people into qualified fighting forces. My Lord Commander, Stannis has recruited approximately 500 then berserkers and 1,000 free folk hunters, led by a dozen free folk chieftains, led by Olaf. Before following Stannis south, Jon first came to Lion to report. Tell Olaf that if the situation is not right, I will allow him to lead his men to retreat on his own. We don't need to pay a large number of casualties for Stannis's ambition. I still have great use for these freeman warriors. Yes, Lord Commander-in-Chief. You have to remember that our Night's Watch remains neutral in the Kingdom's war. I don't want you to destroy it. Before leaving, Benyon Stark gave his nephew a hug and whispered in his ear. This is not a war for us Night's Watch. Swords have no eyes. You better be careful. Okay, Uncle. With that, Jon mounted his warhorse, surrounded by 5 experienced old rangers. Once they recruit enough people, the 6 Night's Watchmen will immediately lead their men back to Eastwatch. Sir, how do you plan to resettle the remaining freemen? We can't feed so many people for nothing, right? After Jon and the other rangers left, Grand Maester Aemon also returned. The first thing he did when he returned was to ask Lion for ways to resettle the free people. Speaking of this, Leon also felt a headache. If I hadn't allocated the supplies reasonably in the past 2 days, I don't know how many free people would have starved to death due to lack of food. Now that the long night has arrived, most of the land is frozen solid and is no longer suitable for planting, except for a few cold-resistant crops such as potatoes that can still grow tenaciously. Even the crops that could be harvested saw a massive reduction in yield. It is currently impossible to feed these 100,000 people through self-sufficiency. It's across the summer sea. It's still summer, and the fleet Stannis left behind hasn't been taken away yet. We can take a boat across to buy food. The solution given by Lion is simple and direct. But this will be a huge expense. With the financial reserves of our Night's Watch, I'm afraid we are unable to afford it. Grand Maester Aemon had an account in his mind, but no matter how he calculated it, it could not satisfy 100,000 hungry mouths. Thinking of this, Grand Maester Aemon discovered that his commander-in-chief was not sad at all when he heard the news. Instead, he showed a mysterious smile. Send a raven to Tywin Lannister and Roose Bolton and ask them if they are willing to support us with a sum of gold dragons or food to feed these 100,000 wildlings. After all, we are the ones who blocked the wildlings and the White Walkers for them. What if they don't want to? I think the south is too far away from here. Even if we let the savages go south at this season, they won't be able to go far. All I need is an attitude. Grand Maester Aemon was clearly not satisfied with Lion's answer. He looked at Sir Davos, the hand of the King of Dragonstone, who was left behind. He was responsible for providing food and fodder for Stannis' southern expedition. That's why I stayed in Donghai Wang. Seeing that Grand Maester Aemon and Lion's eyes fell on him at the same time, he knew that he had to come up with an idea now, not only for the Night's Watch, but also for his lord to have no worries. At this moment, he had a plan in mind, so he said. Before the funds from the southern lords are in place, we can go to the Iron Bank to borrow money to buy food. This bill can be counted on His Majesty Stannis, but the Night's Watch will also have to bear part of the cost. If the Iron Bank is willing to help, it won't be difficult to support 100,000 free people, but what can we use as collateral? Grand Maester Aemon muttered to himself that he couldn't think of any reason for the people of Essos to pay, but just because he couldn't think of an idea didn't mean Lion didn't have one. We are running low on food reserves. We should set out as soon as possible. That's it. Finally, Lion made the final decision and set the departure schedule. Speaking of which, there has been no news of assassinations by the Faceless Men since they parted at Castle, and Leon also wanted to ask the elders of the House of Black and White whether they had forgotten about this test. Before leaving, Lion only took some of the Night's Watch, Davos, and a White Walker, Big Yellow. Rhubarb is used as a warning. Anyone who sees a living White Walker will be frightened. And Davos's ability to talk big is believed to be able to conquer the head of the Iron Bank once again. After a week of drifting on the sea with Lion and others, Stannis' fleet finally saw a magnificent giant statue, which marked that they had finally arrived at their destination, Braavos. The city is actually made up of hundreds of islands scattered throughout a hidden bay. The mainland area near Braavos is covered with dense swamps, while the offshore area is surrounded by towering islands like mountain peaks, leaving only a wide natural strait that is large enough for ocean-going merchant ships to enter and exit freely. At this exit stands a statue known as the Titan of Bravus, which is not only a conspicuous landmark and guiding beacon, but also an impregnable defensive fortress. Adjacent to the Titan is the battle fortress and a massive dockyard known as the Arsenal. Within this fortified enclosure lies a magnificent stone city of grey, gold and red arches, towers and domes. Having been accustomed to the desolate and dilapidated East Watch and the unchanging scenery of the North, many of the night's watchmen on the ship were attracted by the beautiful scenery of Bravus and could not take their eyes away. Davos, as an experienced smuggler, would naturally not let the city scenery in front of him completely attract his attention. He explained to Lion and the other night watchmen like a tour guide. There are many moneylenders in Bravus, and their Iron Bank provides loans to other countries in the world, including the Seven Kingdoms. By the way, those brightly colored boats you saw belong to the world-famous Bravus courtesans. Each courtesan had her own boat and servants, her beauty was sung by singers, goldsmiths and jewelers vied to make objects for her, craftsmen begged for her patronage, trade magnates paid royal ransoms for their arms at balls, banquets and theatrical performances, assassins fought each other in their names. Following Davos' introduction, Lion and other night watchmen saw many women on the flower boats waving to the big ship the night watchmen were on. The clothing and appearance of these women are completely different from those of the heavily made-up and vulgar women in Mole Village. One of the night watchmen could no longer hold back and immediately asked loudly for the price. However, after receiving the woman's answer that was enough to scare him to death, he immediately became depressed. It's just a mere 100 gold royals for a meeting, is it that important? After the fierce battle with the zombies, the golden dragon now means only a number to Leon. Now, the wealthy Lion has also heard the price offered by the woman on the flower boat, but he feels a little confused. How can 100 gold dragons scare a night's watchman who is fearless even when facing the White Walkers? However, what Leon didn't know was that 100 gold royals were enough to buy enough food for 1,000 people to eat for a month. For the poor night watchman, it was impossible for him to have such a huge wealth. Lion had dealt with the Bravus merchant before. The merchant who had been diligently bringing dragon glass ore from Dragonstone was waiting at the dock. Commander-in-Chief, was the journey at sea smooth? As soon as Lion got off the boat, the merchant smiled kindly, grabbed Lion's hand and asked about his well-being. The meeting would have been a joyous occasion if the merchant had not been flanked by hundreds of Bravasi water dancers, dressed in rich attire and looking at him eagerly. Thanks to the seven gods and the old gods, everything went well. Lion glanced at the hundreds of armed attendants standing behind the merchant to reinforce their morale, and said with a forced smile. On the ship, Davos explained to Lion who was standing on the dock. The culture of Bravus has fostered a unique swordplay called water dance. Water dancers display both graceful and deadly skills in combat. They wield rapiers and meet challenges sideways. They are swift as a deer, silent as a shadow, flexible as a snake, calm as water, fierce as a bear, fierce as a wolf, and tough as stone. In Bravus, there are skilled assassins who love duels everywhere, and they often compete with each other to show off their swordsmanship. At present, the Bravus merchants have employed hundreds of water dancers, which also indirectly reflects his strong financial strength. I think I should introduce myself as Urs Peck, Lord K's auntie, a trade magnate in the service of His Majesty the Sea King of Bravus. Perhaps because he was at home, Urs Peck seemed a little fearless. It seems that you signed the contract with a false name, which is a dishonorable act. There was a cold tone in Lion's words. If Urs Peck had not fulfilled his contractual obligations, no one would stand up and say anything even if Lion killed Urs on the spot. Hehe, when you are in a foreign land, you must always be on guard. This is what Master K's auntie told us. Urs Peck did not show the fear he should have shown in the face of Lion's sudden malice. It sounds like your master's name is that of a black man from the Summer Isles. Yes, only in the free trade city can black people hold high positions and call themselves trade tycoons. It was obvious that Urs Peck's face was filled with pride when he mentioned his master. If I'm not mistaken, your Peak family participated in the Black Fire Rebellion and later fled to the continent of Essos. You should be a descendant of this family, right? At this moment, Davos seemed to have thought of something and interjected. That's all in the past. Our family's main business now is trade, and we no longer participate in the kingdom's Game of Thrones. Urs Peak's face immediately turned unhappy when he heard Davos' interruption, and then he gave Davos a cold look, then ordered his water dancers to make a path and made a please gesture to Leon. Before departure, Lion had informed Urs, his only acquaintance on the continent of Essos, of the purpose of his trip. The latter did not disappoint Lion and directly brought Lion and his party to the city of Bravus. In Bravus, only assassins wear fancy clothes. The truly wealthy and powerful swordsmen and faceless men often wear black and dark clothes. Bravus officials, spoonkeepers, and judges, often wear drab grey-brown coats. Bravus holds an annual unmasking festival, which lasts 10 days of feasting and masked revelry. At midnight on the 10th day, when the titans roar, tens of thousands of revelers take off their masks together. Apparently Lion arrived at the right time, as the city was full of Bravus people wearing all kinds of masks, making Lion and his group of foreigners seem a little out of place. In front of a palace complex that was so magnificent that it was hard to describe, Urs stopped and turned to introduce it to Leon. Before meeting the head of the Iron Bank, may I have a word with my master? Urs' words really shocked the night watchmen behind Lion. In their opinion, this palace that looked like the kingdom of God on earth was not actually owned by the Sea King of Bravus. Although Urs was making a request, he did not intend to wait for Leon's answer. Instead, he pushed the door open in the stunned eyes of the night watchman. Lion glanced at Davos, who thought for a moment and nodded. Lord Commander, your attendants must remain outside the door. After Leon and Davos walked in, Urs suddenly reached out to stop the night watchman. The first person he stopped was the White Walker Big Yellow. Speaking of which, the White Walker Big Yellow was wearing a black cloak commonly seen by the Night's Watch, but his face was covered by a hood. The White Walker Rhubarb couldn't speak. After seeing Urs's obstruction, he just silently took off his hood and revealed his true face. Who? Damn, what is this? After the White Walker Rhubarb revealed his eerie and terrifying appearance, a chilling aura emanated from his unchanging cold face. The many guards guarding the door of the business tycoon's house suddenly felt like they were facing a powerful enemy. You have to know that Bravus is a city where people from all over the world gather. Even wizards who have disappeared from the world for a long time may have been heard of by people here. But they could not recognize the true appearance of this creature whose eye sockets were replaced by a dark blue fire. Even though the Night's Watch have been with the White Walker Rhubarb for a long time, they still can't help but feel a chill in their hearts whenever they stand next to it. Although Leon repeatedly assured them that these White Walkers were his obedient subordinates, many of the Night's Watch remained vigilant. Not to mention the people of Bravus who have never seen a White Walker. Urs, your men were not polite to my servants. Also, the name of this creature is White Walker. Leon patted Urs' peck, who also looked incredulous. The latter opened his mouth wide and asked in a low voice. Is this the legendary White Walker? How could it be so obedient and follow you like a servant? Obviously, the people of the Peak family from West Eros are not as ignorant as the people of Bravus. Then, Urs seemed to have thought of something and quickly said to Leon. I'm sorry, Commander-in-Chief, could you please wait a moment while I go and report to the master? Leon and all his men were now sitting in a garden in front of the palace. No one dared to step forward to cause trouble, and the palace servants carefully served these guests who came from afar. Except for the White Walker Rhubarb who revealed his true face, all the Night's Watchmen were dutifully taken to take a bath by the maids. Obviously, this was a high level of etiquette that had never been seen in the beginning. About half an hour later, Urs walked towards the garden, sweating profusely. Urs was followed closely by a bald man, who was dressed in grey, had dark skin, was tall and strong, and his stature was unusually tall. The appearance of this man was like a dark cloud that covered the sky, making it difficult to ignore him. Because of this, many night watchmen speculated that this dark-skinned, bald man might have the blood of giants. Looking at his bulging arms, many night watchmen even subconsciously compared them with the marble pillars in the garden. The conclusion reached is actually not much to give in. When such a humanoid monster came into the garden, the originally empty garden suddenly seemed crowded. But when the night watchers saw the friendly expression on the monster's face, the tense atmosphere in the garden suddenly disappeared. Dear guests who have come from afar, I am Kay's auntie. I am sorry to have neglected you all. Oh, by the way, bring it up. After saying that, Kay's auntie waved his hand, and a beautiful maid with a distinct oriental charm carefully brought over a plate covered with brocade. Kay's auntie revealed the true identity of the item on the plate, and all the night watchmen craned their necks to look over. The beautiful maid was holding a small dish of snow-white salt and a few slices of hot bread with a wheat aroma. All the night watchmen immediately looked at Leon, who stepped forward without hesitation, but he didn't have time to reach out to dip the bread in salt. The delicate maid stretched out her fingers, picked up a small piece of bread, and handed it to Leon's mouth. Her name is Luoji. I bought her from a nudie noble. Isn't she good? Kay's auntie hinted at something. Lion looked at the longing look in the beautiful eyes of the beauty in front of him. He did not take any action. He just opened his mouth and swallowed the bread on his fingers, and even scratched the woman's fingers lightly with his teeth. Leon made such a frivolous move in front of Kay's auntie, but the latter did not fail to notice it. Instead, he ignored Leon's unreasonable behavior with a kind face. However, when it was the turn of other night watchmen, they no longer had the good fortune of being personally served by the beautiful woman, and all the night watchmen had to take the bread and eat it themselves. After the sacred ceremony of bread and salt, Leon spoke. I didn't expect Lord Kay's auntie to understand the customs of us Westeros people. That's natural. After all, although our trade with Westeros has decreased in recent years, it has not been cut off. Kay's auntie extended his hand and invited Leon and others to sit down. There was only one table suitable for meetings in the garden, and there were only seats for 2 people. Except for Leon and Kay's auntie who sat face to face, everyone else had to stand in the corridor in the garden. However, the choice of servants behind Leon and Kay's auntie is much more interesting. After Lion obviously realized that Kay's auntie in front of him was more interested in the White Walker behind him, he let the White Walker Dewang replace the guard duty of Spatium. Standing behind Lion was Davos, who had some insights into the culture of Bravus. On Quisante's side, only Urs and Roger were standing. Leon guessed, if he was not too arrogant, then he was quite confident in his own martial arts. Urs told me your purpose. Apparently, what you need right now is enough food to supply 100,000 people. That's right. As soon as we successfully apply for a loan from the Iron Bank, we will immediately set off to the nearby villages to buy food. In fact, there is no need for you, Commander-in-Chief, to seek a loan from the Iron Bank, nor is there any need to go to the nearby villages to buy food. I, Kay's auntie, can meet your needs alone. Oh? Master Kay's auntie, what do you want from me? The conversation between Leon and Kay's auntie was completely straightforward, without any beating around the bush. Kay's auntie pointed at the White Walker Dewang behind Leon. Lion didn't remember the positions of the 2 people behind him, and thought he was pointing at Davos. After looking back at where Quisante's finger was, Lion had an idea in his mind. What do you want with the White Walkers? This legendary creature is not afraid of cold or heat, magic, or swords. It is a very competent bodyguard, isn't it? Otherwise, you wouldn't have brought it with you. It seems that Lord Kay's auntie wants to use the protagonist of the White Walker disaster that has spread fear in Westeros for thousands of years as a thug. Leon pondered for a moment, then smiled and said, isn't this a bit of an overkill? Your Excellency the Commander-in-Chief, there is no need to doubt it. As a trading tycoon who is as wealthy as a country, I have some enemies around me who want to assassinate me. With such a tireless bodyguard by my side, I can sleep more peacefully. Even if we take a step back, I have everything that other tycoons have, and I also have things that other tycoons don't have, such as the White Walkers. Doesn't this further demonstrate the wisdom of Kay's auntie? Unlike others who looked at the White Walkers with fear, Quisante's eyes were full of admiration. It seems that the White Walker is a perfect work of the Creator. In fact, there is no perfection in the world. If it weren't for the Valyrian sword, the White Walkers might be the closest to perfect creatures. When Leon heard Quisante's reason, he couldn't help but sneer in his heart. It's fine if the rich people in Dubai keep lions and tigers, but you, a rich person in Bravus, actually keep a White Walker as a bodyguard to show off? I can only say that the way you rich people think is really different from ordinary people. However, having said that, Lion would not easily believe Quisante's statement, which was obviously full of loopholes. Seeing that the other party had no intention of revealing the truth, he stood up with a sneer on his face. Why, is my offer not generous enough? How many tens of thousands of soldiers can your savages provide? No matter how many, I will provide you with weapons and can even send master water dancers to train your army for you. You know, even if you are a royal family, you have to pay a high price to hire a master water dancer. Seeing that Lion was about to stop the negotiations, Kay's auntie suddenly panicked and revealed all his cards without reservation. Now, it was Leon's turn to be confused. He didn't understand why a little White Walker could be so important to Kay's auntie. What he didn't know was that Kay's auntie had originally planned to go to the north of the wall to capture a White Walker at all costs, and now Lion actually came to him on his own, which made him indescribably happy. The reason for all this is that Kay's auntie learned the location of the secret treasure house of Valeria many years ago. However, the conditions for opening the secret treasure house are extremely harsh, requiring the ultimate elements of ice and fire to activate them together. As for the element of fire, under the planning of Kay's auntie, the governor of Pentos had given it to a girl from the dragon family. 3 baby dragons had already been hatched by her hands, and now they were just waiting for them to grow up. And the ice element, Quisante's eyes lit up. He couldn't think of any creature with more abundant ice elements than the White Walker in front of him. As long as you give me the White Walkers, everything will be fine. As one of the 13 richest magnates in the free trade cities, Kay's auntie is different from other magnates who rely on shipping, exploitation, and slavery, or training and selling unsullied. His own powerful military force and his position above all others, second only to the Sea King of Bravus, are his uniqueness. This force not only includes the hundreds of water dancers that can be easily mobilized to follow Urs to greet Leon. In his homeland, the Summer Isles, he even had a powerful fleet and an army of invincible golden-heart archers. Having obtained almost all the highest honors in this world, it is inevitable that Kay's auntie yearns for eternal life. Although Valeria's heritage might not grant him immortality. But Kay's auntie still has the ambition to replicate the Dragon King family and conquer the world with the help of giant dragons. Therefore, he was full of curiosity and covetousness about the power of the White Walkers that Leon possessed. But he also understood that the key was how Leon could control the White Walkers, otherwise he would only get a time bomb. Both Leon and Kay's auntie are smart people. Lion naturally heard the hidden meaning of Quisante's words. Hand over the method to control the White Walkers. But Lion just sat down again and asked Quisan a question. Do you know the Night King? I know a little bit about it. It's the first magical creature created by the children of the forest to fight against the first men. But some people say it's the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. There's also a legend that it's the incarnation of a Stark. So, are you confident that you can defeat the Night King and his army head-on? Lion talked to Quisanti with a smile on his face, as if the Night King and his men were just an ordinary lord in the north. Hearing Leon's question, Kay's auntie thought for a moment and asked a question. How many troops does the Night King have? How strong are they? Close to 2 million, the combat power. Leon looked at the White Walker Rhubarb standing beside him. Da Huang immediately understood what he meant. He raised his right hand slightly, and an ice crystal spear instantly condensed in his hand. Then it flew towards a fountain made of a stone lion head in the garden at a speed that was difficult for anyone to predict. Boom! In an instant, the stone lion head that the 2 men were hugging was shattered by the ice crystal spear. After the ice crystal spear had played its role, the ice and snow melted away and disappeared completely. When the noise was heard around the garden, hundreds of water dancers and Summer Isles Goldenheart archers wearing gold chainmail rushed in and surrounded the garden. The Night's Watchman behind Lion thought that the 2 bosses had broken off the negotiation, and immediately drew out the 2-handed swords behind them and pointed them at the surrounding water dancers. Davos beside Lion drew his sword and took a step forward and said, Kay's auntie, are you planning to betray your rights as a guest under the attention of the gods? I had no intention of doing so. Faced with the threat from Davos who only had one hand, Kay's auntie lightly pushed away the sword in his hand, and at the same time cast a look of deep fear at the White Walker Rhubarb. Everyone, please step back. No matter what happens in this garden, you don't need to panic. At Quisante's command, the water dancers and archers who were crowded in the garden all went back home, leaving only the trampled and messy garden. Let's get back to the topic we were discussing. If the Night King's men were as powerful as this White Walker, why would he hide in the land of eternal winter? Even if the Valerian dynasty were to be reborn, they probably wouldn't be able to defeat them with 2 million soldiers. Kay's auntie picked up the pastry on the table and took a bite, talking as he ate. But Leon's attention was no longer on Kay's auntie. Rocky, who was beside him, kept a calm and indifferent expression from the moment the White Walkers attacked to the moment when the water dancers and the Night's Watch came to a standstill, as if she was accustomed to such scenes of swords and sabers. This performance did not seem like the courtesan bought from a nudie noble as Kay's auntie said, but rather like a real princess. As if sensing Leon's gaze, Kay's auntie knew without turning back that Leon was looking at Rosie, whom he brought with him. Commander-in-Chief, if your last name wasn't Victor, I would have suspected that you two were from the same place. You look so alike. After carefully examining Leon's facial features, Kay's auntie made a joke that was neither too big nor too small. Lord Kay's auntie, please stop joking. Our Yeti kingdom has been occupied by rebels from the Thunder Island. The country is destroyed and the people are as lowly as grass. Lord Lion was born in a noble family in West Eros. How could he be an exile from Yiti? When Luoji opened her mouth for the first time, everyone held their breath and listened attentively. Although it was difficult to tell whether Luoji's words were true or false, her clear and melodious voice deeply attracted everyone. When she finished speaking, the only sound in the garden was the sound of the night watchmen swallowing their saliva. If we ignore Luoji's lowly status as a courtesan and her stunning appearance, I'm afraid many night watchmen would be willing to worship her as their goddess based on her voice alone, and would be willing to break their oaths and become her slaves. Even Leon was distracted by Luoji's slightly familiar accent. Perhaps Kay's auntie had brought her here with such an intention. Just before many night watchmen were about to step forward to show their loyalty, Lion successfully turned everyone's attention back to himself. As you said, most of the Night King's 2 million troops are just rotting zombies, whose combat power is only slightly better than that of trained soldiers, but they are not afraid of casualties. If you have an army of the same quality that can defeat the Night King, perhaps the Night King will come to the negotiation table to discuss with you. I have to say, you hit the nail on the head. I believe that the Commander-in-Chief must have paid a heavy price in terms of casualties to capture such a White Walker alive. Listening to the conversation between the two, a night watchman curled his lips and muttered softly. Oh, what if I said that there are a full 40 of our White Walker patrols outside the wall, guarding against and monitoring the Night King's army? However, the night watchman was quickly scolded by Specium to shut up. Casualties are secondary. It's just that Lord Kay's auntie, I have no intention of selling the White Walkers for the time being. In other words, before I see a ship heading to Eastwatch. Leon didn't finish what he was saying, as he thought the clever Kay's auntie would understand what he meant without him having to say it explicitly. Hearing that Leon's words clearly showed his distrust of Kay's auntie was not annoyed. He just called Urs forward and whispered to him, then laughed loudly and said, "Give me 10 days. In 10 days, there will be a fleet of transport ships at the dock heading to Donghai Wang. By then, we can settle the matter between people and goods." When Davos and Lion walked out of Quisante's palace side by side, this famous honest man in West Eros had not figured out one thing. Was the mission of this trip completed so hastily? Is this White Walker so valuable? That's enough food for 100,000 people and enough weapons and war horses to arm 10,000 people. Although part of the rations of these 100,000 people will be allocated to Stannis' Southern Expedition Army, it is only a drop in the bucket among the astronomical figures. Lion did not answer Davos' question. Although he didn't know what Kay's auntie planned to do with the White Walkers, he didn't have the intention to dig deep into the matter. At least, he had no intention of worrying about it before he resolved the 3 waves of assassinations by the Faceless Men. After they walked out of Quisante's palace, Leon turned to his night watchman and said, "Since Kay's auntie has invited you to rest in his palace, you may disband right here." After receiving Lion's order, the night watchmen praised him from the bottom of their hearts, throwing out all kinds of flattering words as if they were free. Just now, the Night's Watch learned that no matter where they were in Bravus, they could get their bills waived by simply mentioning Quisante's name when paying. After seeing Quisante's magnificent palace, no one would care about Quisante's financial resources and influence in Bravus. As a brother of the Night's Watch, how can you not relax on the flower boat when you go out? Especially in Bravus, which is famous for its colorfulness and openness. Even several older Night's Watch seniors in the team mingled with the young Night's Watch with a smile on their faces. After saying goodbye to Leon, they agreed to go to the flower boat docked at the pier. At this time, Luoji, who was in charge of seeing Leon and his party off, asked at the right time, "My lord, the city of Bravus is so beautiful, would you like to go out for a walk?" Leon thought about it, then smiled calmly and said, "I need to go to the Black and White Court for something. If the lady is willing, can you lead the way for me?" Hearing Leon's request, Luoji was naturally happy to help. After all the Night's Watch members left, only Davos and the dedicated Spacium were left by Lion's side. They followed Lion silently, and the White Walker Rhubarb, who put on his hood again, guarded him on his left and right. "Davos, wouldn't you like to go on the boat?" Lion frowned. It was okay to have a loyal light bulb like Spacium next to him, but what's wrong with you, Davos? Davos looked at the situation in front of him. Roach and Lion were standing together, like a newlywed couple. As a qualified bodyguard, it was not out of place for Spacium, who had a murderous aura, to follow Lion. So what was the point of him joining them? Okay, I'll go." Although Davos left, he did not go to the dock. Instead, he turned and walked towards the city of Bravus. Obviously, he also had his own destination. This person, can you please stay in Lord Quisante's residence and wait? Seeing that the White Walker Big Yellow was also going to follow, Luoji felt a little embarrassed. Although the White Walker Big Yellow was emitting a chill that made people stay away from it, it was inexplicably afraid of Quisante's palace, as if there was an alchemy furnace of Taishang Lejun hidden in the palace, and it was the main ingredient in the alchemy. Seeing Leon leaving, it also wanted to follow. Just wait here and don't move around. Lion pointed to the 3-acre land in front of the palace gate, and the White Walker Big Yellow immediately exhaled a breath of cold air as if a burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He nodded and indicated that he would stand there and wait for Lion to come back. The task that Kwa Sandi gave to Roji was to keep the White Walkers in the palace no matter what. Standing at the palace gate can be considered as completing the task, right? Thinking of this, Luoji couldn't help but frown. Just when she was about to persuade Leon again, Leon and Spacium had already left. Luoji hurried over. Led by Luoji, the three of them slowly walked towards the black and white courtyard. Lion, a man who had seldom travelled in his past or present life, could not help but marvel at the sight of Bravus before him. This is just as Grandpa Martin described, the city of Bravus combines the romance of Venice on the water, the mystery of Rhodes in Greece, the vitality of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and the simplicity of Bruges in Belgium. The fog and eel-infested canals in London, England, add a different style to the city. In Bravus, you can experience the customs of the 5 kingdoms without leaving your home. This is a little fun that only Lion understands. The Purple Harbour in the north of Bravus is located under the dome of the high tower of the Sea King's Palace. Only Bravus locals are qualified to use the dock here. Lion and his 2 companions crossed the waters by boat and finally arrived at the island where the House of Black and White was located. When viewed from afar on the water, the island was not very large, and a Greek marble-style temple was the only building on this bare island. When I got closer, I realized that Bravus was full of wonders, and the temple of the thousand-faced god was so magnificent. The main entrance of the temple consisted of 2 wooden doors, one black and one white. When Lion landed, he was surprised to find that the height of the 2 wooden doors was as high as the thigh of the Bravus Titan. Spacium behind Lion couldn't help but compare the grandeur of the temple in front of him with the Great Wall, but he finally concluded that the Great Wall was better. Luoji seemed to be accustomed to the reactions of Leon and others. After all, it was not her first time here, nor was it the first time she brought people here. Although she didn't believe that anyone could conquer the White Walkers, there was no other formidable opponent in the world that forced Lion to seek help from the faceless men of the House of Black and White. Won't you come up? After Leon and Spacium got ashore, they found that Roger was still sitting in the boat and had no intention of going ashore. After hearing Leon's question, Luoji just smiled calmly, then shook her head and said, "In Udi, we call the thousand-faced god the Night Lion. The Night Lion's gift is extremely important to me. Because of this, I cannot afford to pay enough blood money at the moment." Apparently Luoji is also one of those people in the world who needs help from the thousand-faced god, but she cannot afford the price to ask the faceless man for help at the moment. However, Leon did not care about the implication of her words. Seeing that she was unwilling to go ashore, he did not force her. The most important thing at the moment was to explore the temple in front of him. "Spacium, you can go back to the ship and wait for me." But before knocking on the door, Leon frowned, thinking that if the door opened and he was greeted by the final test of the thousand-faced god, Spacium might not be able to cope with it. However, after hearing Leon's order, Spacium showed a fearless and indifferent expression. Leon saw determination in his eyes. So Leon stopped insisting and motioned for Spacium to go forward and knock on the door. However, before Spacium could figure out how to knock on the tall wooden door, the black door was suddenly opened from the inside, and a face that Leon was quite familiar with peeked out from inside. "Jacqueline." Hearing Leon's question, Jacqueline Hagar's pupils shrank, but he didn't say anything. He just quickly flashed out of the temple and stood in front of Leon. Jacqueline Hagar has long hair, half of which is silver and half of which is red, and a face that has appeared many times in TV dramas. However, when he opened his mouth, his style was extremely similar to Maud's. I don't know who imitated whom, or if all faceless men are like this. How did the boy know someone's name, Jacqueline Hagar? Oh, did Maud tell the boy? Walking out of the door, Jacqueline closed the gate of the House of Black and White casually, and looked at Leon with a serious face. In response to Jacqueline's 3 questions, Leon just smiled and pointed at a pair of peeping eyes in the gap between the doors. Not only that, I also know that the second lady of the Wolf family, Arya Stark, is also hiding here. Night Watchman, I have never seen you before. Also, it's fine that you know Jacquine's name, but why do you know mine? A vigilant girl's voice came from inside the door. The voice came from Arya Stark. Leon thought, do I have to tell you that I have watched the TV series? I am the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Your brother Jon Snow has often mentioned you to me. You are lying. I only showed my eyes. How could you identify me so easily? Your brother said that among all the brothers and sisters in the Wolf family, he loved you the most. On the day he went north to the Great Wall, he specially asked a blacksmith to make a rapier for you. It was named Needle, right? Well, you look almost the same age as my brother, how could you be the Lord Commander? Oh, I see, you are one of Old Bear's bastards? Perhaps you have seen me at a dinner party in Winterfell, that would make sense. As Jiakun listened to the conversation between the two, a hint of impatience gradually appeared on his expressionless face. What on earth is the boy doing here? Anyway, the girl is useful to the thousand-faced god, you can't take her away. Jiakun moved his body imperceptibly and stood in front of the crack in the door. Well, the thousand-faced god gave me 3 tests before. I have completed 2 so far, and there is 1 left, so I want to take the initiative to accept the test. So that's how it is. Well, follow me. After listening to Leon's purpose, Jiakun nodded calmly and pushed the door open. But Arya Stark, who had been hiding behind the door, suddenly disappeared, or hid in the dark. However, the purpose of Leon's trip is not her, so let her continue to complete her studies as a faceless man. In the lightless temple, there were only a few candles for lighting. Leon and the other man followed behind Jacqueline, stepping on Jacquine's shadow and slowly moving to a pool of spring water. Jacqueline took out a wooden bowl from his arms, bent down to scoop a bowl of water, turned around and handed it to Leon. This is the final test. As long as you drink it, you will complete your mission. When Jiakun spoke, his entire face was obscured by shadow, making it difficult to tell whether his expression was kind or malicious. In short, it was hard to guess. Commander-in-Chief, let me help you test the poison. In this somewhat gloomy environment, it is not a wise choice to just drink the water handed to you by a stranger. But seeing that Lion was determined, Spiasum stopped trying to stop him and volunteered to test the poison himself. If you drink it, it will be poison. Jacquine's voice echoed quietly in the temple, and he moved the wooden bowl to Spiasum. Oh, you underestimate me? Do you think I wouldn't dare to die for the Commander-in-Chief? Spiasum hesitated for perhaps 2 or 3 seconds, then he glanced at Leon, as if he had made up his mind, took a deep breath, and was about to take the bowl. But Leon got the wooden bowl in his hands before he could. Don't drink it. That's the holy water given by the thousand-faced god to those who seek liberation. Alia suddenly appeared out of nowhere, her face full of anxiety, and she stretched out her hand to knock over the bowl in Leon's hand. It can be seen that she inexplicably has a good impression of the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch who calls himself her brother. Perhaps she sees the shadow of Jon Snow in Lion. This is not surprising, as the two are almost the same age, and Lion is even more handsome than Jon. What cannot be ignored is that the skill Charming, which has a 30-point charm bonus, is also playing a subtle role. But with Leon's current skills, he would never let her succeed so easily. Jacqueline also reached out and grabbed Arya in front of him, holding her tightly to prevent her from continuing to make trouble. Lion stared at the holy water in the wooden bowl. Under the dim candle light of the temple, it looked as deep and thick as ink in the middle of the night. He carefully extended his finger and touched the mysterious liquid, but was surprised to find that it felt no different from ordinary water, colorless and odorless, without any sacred breath. Only the water in the wooden bowl is holy water. Jacqueline seemed to see what Leon was thinking and explained it for him. Don't drink it. You'll really die. Alia continued to shout anxiously. Her kind nature made her unable to bear to see her brother's superior lose his life for no reason. Sir, let me test the poison for you. Specium behind Leon was equally anxious. Jacqueline, tell me, is today the day I die? However, after listening to the 3 people's words, Leon hesitated for a moment and asked the question in his heart to the faceless man Jacqueline in front of him. But Jacqueline did not answer immediately. Leon thought about it, and finally drank the holy water in the wooden bowl in one gulp. To be honest, if Leon hadn't obtained the skill of taunting death that allowed him to avoid death once before, he really wouldn't have dared to make up his mind to try it now. After seeing Leon drink the holy water, Jacqueline showed a peaceful smile on his face and said to Arya in his arms, "All men are mortal." As soon as Jacqueline finished speaking, Leon's whole body stiffened, and then he fell straight back. "What have you done to the commander-in-chief?" Spiasm was immediately furious, and drew out the two-handed sword behind him and slashed directly at Jacqueline. Mocking death skill, activated. You escaped death once. Skill cooldown time, 10 years. After falling down, these 3 lines of small words suddenly appeared in Leon's mind. At the same time, tasks that have not been done for a long time have also been updated. Escape 3 waves of assassinations by the Faceless Men, 3/3. The reward for completing the passive mission is 4 Faceless Men refreshed every month, which can be converted into 4 6th level soldiers at will. The world opens a corner for you. As a thousand-faced god walking on earth, you will not be afraid of death until you have experienced true death. The old gods are dead, and the godhood is vacant. I am the god of 1,000 faces and the god of death. In order to seize the godhood, I must lay down the divine fire, and you are the one I have chosen. I am very satisfied with your killing. Enough killing will make me sublime. Current progress, / What? Did I die in vain? And does the thousand-faced god really intend to kill me? Leon in his mind suddenly became extremely angry. This thousand-faced god was too arrogant. He actually treated him as a guinea pig? Originally, Leon thought that the third test was just a formality, but he didn't expect that he would really die. If Leon didn't have the skill of taunting the god of death. Suddenly, a voice that had disappeared for a long time sounded in Leon's mind again. The thousand-faced god is indeed plotting against you. This voice was the same voice that installed the Mount and Blade panel for Leon when he first came into this world but did not even leave a name. Who are you? It's not important. I just want to ask you one question, do you hate the thousand-faced god? He treats you as a plaything. Hate? Why not hate? Well, I'll give you a chance to kill him. Receive panel task. Raise all 6 dimensions to 30 points, and gain a supernatural physique. You will have a weak godhood and the power of faith. What kind of faith you want to have depends on your actions. After becoming a saint, you will open the arena of the gods. You will project the arena in the form of a god, fight with the gods of the world, and destroy them with the Supreme Fang Tian Huaji. Reward, Supreme Fang Tian Huaji, already issued, in Bravo City, I believe you can find it. Supreme Fang Tian Huaji, a long pole weapon. In the hands of a person with a supernatural physique, it can exert a god-damaging effect. If an ordinary person gets it, it will only have the effect of top-grade Valyrian steel. Young man, quickly pick it up and kill the gods. After the voice said this, it disappeared without a trace again. Leon couldn't help but wonder who this person was and why he didn't even leave his name after helping him time and time again. Thinking of this, Lion suddenly felt dizzy and his mind was filled with a feeling. When the feeling subsided, Lion slowly opened his eyes. Where am I? When Leon opened his eyes again, he was hurt by a bright light, so he asked subconsciously. On my ship, Lord Lion. However, the one who answered Leon was not someone from Spacium or the House of Black and White as he expected, but Luoji. In the House of Black and White, Jacqueline placed a fresh human skin mask on the altar. If Leon saw it, he might not recognize whose face it was. The face belongs to a young girl named Gressa Hama. 5 minutes ago, Grace saw with her own eyes that Leon drank the holy water without hesitation, and then fell to the ground with blood flowing from all 7 orifices. Then Jacqueline turned to her and said, all men must be served. Seeing that her enemy was dead and her wish was fulfilled, the fanatical Grace stabbed her own heart with a dagger without hesitation, and died with a wild laugh of revenge. Jia-kun, why would my senior sister commit suicide for no reason? Although Grace's attitude towards Alia was not usually very good, she had been with her day and night for some time after all. Arya's eyes were full of confusion, as if she didn't understand why the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch would willingly drink the holy water. Jacqueline sat by the pool, scooped up a bowl of holy water, and said to her, Gresha has nothing. The only blood money she can pay is her life, and the person she wants to dedicate is Leon Victor. Spacium knelt on all fours on the cold ground of the temple, with the broken two-handed sword in front of him. At that moment, Spacium, brandishing his two-handed sword in anger, attacked Jacqueline. His sword flashed, and with a fierce momentum he went straight for Jia Kun's vital points. However, he did not expect that Jia Kun's martial arts were so powerful. Jacquin moved and easily dodged Spasium's attack, then quickly took action and snatched the blade with his bare hands. The two fingers clamped the sharp two-handed sword of Spasium like a pair of pliers. He exerted a little force, and with a click, Spasium's two-handed sword was broken. Shocked, Spasium took a few steps back. He looked down at the broken sword in his hand, with a hint of reluctance and anger in his eyes. However, he did not give up, but took a deep breath and prepared to attack again. Just as Spasium was about to continue his attack, Jacquin took the initiative. He took a step forward, like a tiger descending from a mountain, and punched Spasium in the chest. Although Spasium reacted quickly, he was still hit by Jacquin's punch. Bang! With a dull sound, Spasium's body flew backwards as if hit by a huge hammer and fell heavily to the ground. He struggled to stand up, but his body had lost all strength from Jacquin's punch, so he could only lie on the ground, unable to resist. Although, I'm sorry, but you have to leave. The thousand-faced god does not need your service. Jacquin easily defeated Spasium, but he had no intention of taking Spasium's life immediately. You dare to murder the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch? You are going against the Seven Kingdoms. Spasium stood up shakily from the ground with difficulty, holding a half-broken two-handed sword in his hand, blood spurting out of his mouth. Jia Kun suddenly looked at Leon lying on the ground with a sense of realization, frowned and said, "Perhaps you should carry your commander-in-chief out of the House of Black and White, and when he wakes up, tell him that the test is over. Didn't the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch die after drinking the holy water?" When Arya heard what Jacquin said, she screamed, and it was obvious that she cared very much about Leon's life and death. She hurriedly tried to pick up Leon from the ground to check on him, but Spasium stood in front of Alia. There was a hint of ferocity in Spasium's eyes. He would never trust anyone from the House of Black and White again. Arya was helpless about this, but she could empathize with Spasium's distrust of everything in his eyes. When she arrived at King's Landing, she witnessed her beloved father, Lord Ned Stark, being brutally beheaded by the king. From that moment on, I had the same look in my eyes. Sorry. Alia could only apologize to Spasium. Just like that, holding the unconscious Leon in his arms, Spasium returned with difficulty to the boat on shore where they had set out. There, Luoji was still waiting for them. What happened, Commander-in-Chief? He drank the holy water of the House of Black and White, but the faceless man named Jacquin said he could still be saved. After saying this, Spasium, who had managed to walk out with one breath, could no longer control his exhaustion and fell face down on the ground. So, where are you taking me? After hearing from Luoji that it was Spasium who carried him onto the boat after he passed out, Leon subconsciously looked around. However, the ship was not big and did not have a cabin large enough to hide a big man. I sent your men back to Quisante's palace for treatment. As for where I'm taking you, you'll know if you follow me. Maybe it was because Leon and Luoji were the only ones left on the boat. As Luoji spoke, a barely perceptible smirk appeared on her face, which was full of oriental mysterious charm. Lion had no time to play charades with Roki, especially since the other party was a Bravu's maid whom he had just met. He was now eager to find Spasium. And then? Of course, he would go to the House of Black and White to settle accounts with that bastard Jia Kun. Never mind, Jia Kun was just a pawn of the thousand-faced god. He would wait until he had cultivated his six-dimensional data to the full extent and opened the arena of the gods, and then he would bring the thousand-faced god over to give him a good beating. Good idea though. But Lion was unfamiliar with the ways of Bravus, and without Ragi's guidance, he would probably not be able to find his way back for a while. However, Luoji had an expression as if hesitant to speak, and kept glancing at Leon, which made his anxiety and anger gradually subside. You really drank the holy water from the House of Black and White, and you're still alive? Ah! After a brief silence, Luoji continued to ask. Commander-in-Chief, can I call you Leon? It doesn't matter. Leon, has anyone ever told you that you look very similar to the Yiti men? Maybe your mother is an Yiti man. Facing Luoji's nonsense, Leon tilted his head and thought for a while, then answered straightforwardly. No. Oh. After being rejected by Lion, Luoji was not annoyed. Instead, she continued to look at Lion's face with interest, as if the topic just now opened the door to a new world for her. Lion, who didn't know where to go, saw that Luoji was so curious about him, so he asked without hesitation. Why would a beautiful woman like you be willing to be a black man's maid? Are you coveting Quisante's superiority? As soon as Leon's words came out, he regretted it. After all, although in the eyes of outsiders, Leon might be a fierce and cruel person, he was definitely not the kind of unruly person. However, Luoji did not feel offended when she heard Leon's words, and immediately replied without even blushing. Quisanti? He was just an average guy on my original flower boat. However, Luoji was very satisfied with Lion's attitude. Her eyes suddenly became full of offensive desire when she looked at Lion. After seeing Luoji's eyes, Leon immediately sat further away from her and said in a cold tone. Ma'am, I have to warn you, a forced melon is not sweet. Oh? Isn't this a proverb from our Yi land? But there is another part of this proverb. What? If you've already forced the melon, why bother about whether it's sweet? Lion was unable to cope with Luoji, who had offended him for no reason. He has already sensed that Luoji is the kind of woman who becomes stronger when you are weak and even stronger when you are strong. At this time, Leon already regretted his decision to covet the beautiful tour guide and let her lead the way for him. In this somewhat awkward conversation atmosphere, the boat carrying Leon and Rosie gradually sailed into a dead end along the dense water network of Bravu City. Lion noticed that on both sides of this dead end were rows of houses that could be seen everywhere in Bravus. The only difference is that there are no residents struggling for life here. It lacks the atmosphere of everyday life and is particularly dead silent. Okay, here we are, let's get ashore. Luoji stood up and jumped onto the shore before the boat stopped. What is this place? This is my home, I guess. Your home? Aren't you Quisante's maid? Do you still need to come out and rent a house? Leon did not act rashly because he had just been cheated by the House of Black and White and was still afraid of unfamiliar places. What's more, the atmosphere here is obviously abnormal, and it seems like there is an ambush. Especially in the current scene of a man and a woman alone, Leon could even imagine Luoji taking him to a small room, and then suddenly hundreds of burly men rushed out of the closet and shouted, "Don't move! Honey trap!" Lion doesn't want to fall into any trap again. After all, in his previous life, his mother often told him that boys must protect themselves when they are outside. So Leon stood on the boat hesitantly and did not follow. Don't worry, I won't hurt you, just follow me. Luoji frowned after she finished speaking, because she noticed that Leon immediately sat back in the cabin after hearing what she said, and said to the boatman who remained silent. Master, take me back to Zigong Pier, thank you. However, after Lion said this, the boatman did not move for a long time, which made Lion look back in surprise. The boatman's straw hat was slightly raised, revealing a face that was clearly that of an Yiti man. He looked at Leon expressionlessly. It's obvious that the boatman won't listen to Leon because he's Rosie's man. Roggy, what do you mean? Don't you want to know why Quisanti is so determined to plot against your White Walkers? No, if he wants it, just give it to him. We have plenty of White Walkers in our Night's Watch anyway. How is that possible? Let alone White Walkers, even if you want to catch a white, you will suffer heavy casualties. Luoji frowned slightly, obviously dissatisfied with Leon's attitude. But now it was Leon's turn to feel strange. How dare you, a maid of Quisanti, be so rude to him? Thinking of this, Leon stepped onto the shore without hesitation, intending to interrogate Luoji thoroughly, even forgetting whether he had fallen into a honey trap. However, just as he stepped onto the shore, he happened to meet an elderly Yudi warrior pushing the door open. At the moment when Leon's eyes met the old man's, he suddenly felt like he was caught having an affair by the woman's elders. But then Lion shook his head and threw this absurd idea out of his mind. I didn't have time to do anything, why did I get caught? The older Yudi warrior obviously did not expect Leon's arrival. He immediately looked at Leon vigilantly, with one hand on the hilt of the sword. Especially after seeing Leon's face full of Yiti features, his alertness was heightened to an unprecedented level. Luoji, who is this? Elder Tang, don't be nervous. I brought him here. His name is Leon Victor. He is a Westeros man and the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch. In short, he is not a rebel from Thunder Island. Night Watch? The armor he wears is indeed of the Night Watch style. The Yudi warrior known as Elder Tang took a quick look at what Leon was wearing and nodded secretly, but he did not let his guard down. What did you bring him here for? Elder Tang asked Luoji in a serious tone. Haha, don't get me wrong, since you don't welcome me, I'll leave now. Seeing that Leon was planning to turn back after finally getting ashore, Luoji suddenly became anxious. Elder Tang, whether you believe it or not, Commander-in-Chief Lion has just completed the task for us. He captured a genuine White Walker for K's auntie. Impossible, White Walkers can only die in battle, they will never be captured. After hearing what Luoji said, Elder Tang was silent for a moment and then immediately refuted. From his words, it seemed that he knew a lot about the White Walkers. We paid so many casualties just to capture a ghoul, and even your brother. Elder Tang had not yet finished his words when a look of sadness appeared on his face, as if he was recalling some sad events from the past. Because of this, I think we can use Leon's power to complete our great cause of restoring our country. Moreover, he once drank the holy water of the Night Lion and remained alive. What? After hearing Luoji's words, Elder Tang was extremely surprised. He looked up and down at Leon, and then said in disbelief. Impossible, no one can drink the holy water of the Night Lion and survive. Unless I am the child of destiny. Seeing the two Yi people talking in front of him incomprehensible words, Lion was very confused, so he interrupted jokingly. Maybe. But did you really capture a White Walker for K's auntie? Yes, to be precise, I didn't capture them. They voluntarily submitted to me. If De Huang heard what Leon said, he would definitely think, yes, under the threat of death. Haha, Luoji, I get it, you and your new Night Watch friend are both good at joking. After listening to Leon's speech, Elder Tang did not refute it immediately. He couldn't help but think that this might be a joke played on him by the two of them. Cough, cough, cough. Suddenly, Elder Tang coughed loudly a few times. Luoji quickly patted him on the back and handed him her handkerchief. When Elder Tang finished coughing, Leon saw that his handkerchief was covered with the blood he coughed up, mixed with some blood foam from his internal organs. It was obvious that he had internal injuries, but the performances of Luoji and Elder Tang were beyond Leon's expectations, as if they were not surprised by this. It's all right, Night Watchman. It's just an old problem of mine. You can come in and sit down if you like. After saying that, Elder Tang waved his hand, declined Luoji's offer of support, and pointed to the door behind them. I think it's better not to disturb you. After all, I've been unconscious for so long, my men must be worried. Leon also waved his hand and prepared to leave. It'll only take you a moment. Come in and sit down. Luoji supported Elder Tang and threw a wink at Leon. This. Leon could only say that he still had a long way to go in terms of how to reject a girl's kindness. When the three of them walked into the yard, Leon immediately smelled a strong scent of herbs, and this smell was quite familiar. Lion clearly remembers that when he was a child, he often needed to drink Chinese medicine to regulate his body due to indigestion. Now, when he walked into the yard, the smell he smelled was so similar to the bitter and unforgettable smell in his previous life, as if he had traveled through time and space. Are you boiling herbs? Leon sniffed and asked Luoji. You really understand, Leon? Luoji turned around and showed an admiring expression, but Elder Tang still had a worried look on his face and continued walking silently. We walked through the courtyard to the lobby. After seeing the situation in the lobby, Leon frowned immediately. There were dozens of beds in the lobby, which was not very big to begin with, and all of them were filled with Yi warriors wrapped in bandages. Now, Lion finally knew where this strong smell of Chinese medicine came from. This is not the place to talk, please follow me. Elder Tang took a deep breath of the strong herbal smell in the air, as if it could boost his spirits, and then took Leon to a meeting room. Lion had a suspicion in his mind. He felt that the Yi in the Game of Thrones world was most likely inspired by ancient Eastern civilization. The appearance of Luoji and Elder Tang before him now further confirmed his thoughts. Not only the name, but even the custom of using herbal medicine to treat illness and injury, as well as the style of the warriors' long swords, are quite similar to the embroidered spring swords of the Jinyue in Lion's memory. When Elder Tang asked Leon to sit down in the guest seat, Leon suddenly felt a strong curiosity in his heart. I just heard Luoji say that you are the Yi Restoration Army? Maybe I should just forget it. It doesn't matter. The whole of Bravus knows our goal. We Yudi people firmly believe in a motto, only dreams that dare to be spoken out are easier to achieve. Although Elder Tang was a little weak after coughing up blood, he was full of energy when he said this. It makes people feel inexplicably convinced, but Lion is used to playing Mount and Blade, especially since the first generation. Behind every dynasty there is another heir who claims to be the orthodox dynasty and announces that he wants to restore the country. So after hearing what Luo Ji and Elder Tang said, he didn't feel any waves in his heart. Well, Roger, if your goal is to convince me to join your cause, I can only say that I'm sorry. Lion thought about it and simply stopped talking. After all, he was now the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch and a big shot no matter where he went. There was no need for him to throw himself into a king's war to restore his country like an adventurer who was eager to make a name for himself. I understand. After all, our Yi land is too far away for both you Westeros people and Essos people. No, it's not a matter of distance. It's just that I can't be in two places at once. I have led knights north of the wall and have seen you, the Night's Watch, but the Lord Commander at that time seemed to be named Jeor Mormont. Yes, Lord Commander Jeor Mormont is dead, killed by traitors, and I have avenged his death. Leon chatted with Elder Tang for a few words, and then saw Luo Ji constantly winking at Elder Tang. Although Elder Tang and Luo Ji had a tacit understanding, he was full of disbelief because of this. However, he could not resist Luo Ji's eye signal, so he slowly told a story. When we escaped from Yudu, we still had 200 Yudi warriors. 200 people, in order to complete the task assigned to us by Quisan, to capture a White Walker, even if it was a white. But you saw the consequences in the lobby. If what Luo Ji said is true, I should really thank you. In fact, as long as the Night King's production capacity can keep up, I can have as many White Walkers as I want. After Leon finished speaking, he saw Elder Tang look at Luo Ji suspiciously again, and the latter immediately gave him an affirmative look. At this moment, Elder Tang's expression suddenly became somewhat solemn. Lion, the White Walkers may not mean much to you, but they mean a lot to K's auntie. Elder Tang finished speaking with a serious expression, and Luo Ji immediately added. K's auntie thought that no one knew about his plan. He needed White Walkers and Dragon Blood, two extreme ice and fire magics, to open the secret treasure house of Valeria. Little did he know that the first to know this news were our Yi Restoration Army. Elder Tang's face finally looked a little embarrassed at this time. He wanted to interrupt Luo Ji several times and signaled her with his eyes not to continue. But Luo Ji was so deeply attracted by Leon's charm that she couldn't help but tell him the secret. The secret vault contains treasures needed to revive the Valyrian Empire. K's auntie and we are convinced that the treasures are far more than just dragon eggs that can be hatched. As he spoke, Luo Ji pressed the mechanism of the vase beside him, and under Elder Tang's serious, murderous gaze, he took out a long wooden box from the secret room. Leon stepped forward to lend a hand. The weight was not light, weighing several dozen kilograms. After Luo Ji opened the box, Leon found that it was a halberd with a wooden handle that could be assembled. This is a magical weapon that the Yi Restoration Army found outside the secret treasure house. If it weren't for it, I'm afraid we would have died at the hands of the White Walkers. Elder Tang explained for Leon. However, Elder Tang's explanation was somewhat redundant to Leon, because he recognized at first sight that this was the reward Supreme Fang Tian Huaji given to him by the unknown being. It's just a bit embarrassing that this weapon is now in the hands of the Yi people. Just when Leon was thinking of some excuse to trick the weapon into his hand, Luo Ji said openly. Now Elder Tang is seriously injured, and none of the other Yi warriors can wield this weapon. If you like it, I'll give it to you. As Luo Ji spoke, a malicious smile involuntarily appeared on her face, which ruthlessly betrayed her true feelings. If there are no additional conditions, I appreciate your kindness. By the way, today happens to be my birthday, and I like this birthday gift very much. Leon didn't care what Luo Ji was thinking and started assembling it directly. Elder Tang originally thought that Leon would be polite, so he would just take the treasure back. After all, the Yi people would never give gifts so sincerely in such a direct way. But I didn't expect that Leon, with his thick eyebrows and big eyes, looked like an Yi, but what he did was no different from the Westeros bandits. After Lion quickly finished assembling, he went straight to the courtyard to practice. His movements were so smooth that Luo Ji was stunned. Elder Tang at the side hurriedly whispered, Princess, you messed up. We wanted to recruit a powerful warrior with this Valyrian steel halberd, but, you're going to send him away. I didn't expect Leon to be so rude. Looking at Leon wielding the halberd vigorously in the courtyard, tears suddenly welled up in Luo Ji's eyes. Seeing this, Elder Tang quickly comforted him. Don't cry, Princess. The people of Westeros have never seen such a weapon before. It will definitely be difficult for him to use it. He will return it to us when the time comes. However, Elder Tang's words were quickly refuted by Leon's skilled halberd skills, and for a moment, the two were a little dazed. In Lion they seemed to see the elegance of Yudu's most famous long halberd royal guards. When Leon finally finished practicing all the moves that came with the full-level long pole mastery, his whole body was soaked with sweat. He looked at Luoji, a smile appeared on his face, and said, "I like the gift very much." "Thank you, Luoji." After that, Leon held the long pole vertically, bowed to the two of them and said, "See you later." And many more. Seeing that Leon was really leaving, Luoji tried to stop him and said in a tearful voice, "You can take this weapon, but you have to marry me." After hearing Luoji's words, Leon and Elder Tang reacted in a surprisingly similar manner. "This nonsense, princess. Commander-in-Chief Lion is a night watchman. How could he possibly marry you?" Elder Tang immediately became angry, and shouted in a tone that was beyond what a subordinate should use. "Princess." Hearing Elder Tang address Luoji like that, Leon was a little confused. Didn't K's auntie say that he bought Luoji from an Yi de noble as a maid? How could she be a princess? "I don't care. He took away the sacred artifact of our Yi Restoration Army. Anyway, that is my dowry. If you want it, you have to marry me." Luoji gritted her teeth and stamped her feet, as if she had made some kind of decision. Leon really wanted to pull that unknown being out and beat him up, and ask him why the equipment he rewarded to Leon came with the condition of marrying the princess? If it is like this. Thinking of this, Leon glanced at Luoji's appearance. Okay. It doesn't seem unacceptable. However, Leon still had some concerns in his heart. After all, it was not clear whether Luoji's identity as a princess was true or not. Just based on her previous profession. Leon still looked at her with tinted glasses. "Hey, don't look at me with such disgust. I'm selling my art on the flower boat, not my body." Luoji seemed to be touched by Leon's disgusted look, and immediately frowned in dissatisfaction and reminded him. "Well, although I have to abide by my oath as a night's watchman, I'm afraid I will let the lady down." When Leon spoke, he had a regretful expression on his face, which made him seem very sincere. "The Night's Watch Oath? What is that?" Speaking of which, this was also the first time that Luoji heard about the Night's Watch Oath. The knowledgeable Elder Tang gave an explanation. Every night watchman on the wall has sworn an oath. They vowed not to marry, have children, or receive fiefdoms, and to devote themselves wholeheartedly to the cause of protecting the wall. I don't believe that there is no night's watchman who would break his oath. After hearing this, Luoji looked non-committal. "Perhaps you are right, but I have personally killed more than 50 people who betrayed their oaths." When he said this, a hint of sadness appeared on Leon's slightly immature face. No matter how Luoji looked at it, it was hard to connect Leon with what he said. Seeing Leon's firm attitude, Elder Tang decided that he had to be the bad guy for once. Otherwise, seeing how reluctant Leon seems, this Supreme Fang Tianhuaji will be gone forever. "Commander-in-Chief Lion, Princess Luoji was just joking with you. This weapon carries the hope of our Yi Restoration Army. We needed to recruit a powerful warrior to recruit and command the army for us and complete the great cause of restoring our country. We, the Yi Restoration Army, have almost nothing left. This weapon is our last chance." Elder Tang spoke so sincerely that Leon couldn't help but want to return the weapon, but Leon also had his reasons for having the weapon. After all, with it, Lion will be able to play a greater role in the upcoming arena of the gods. Thoughts came and went, and Lion suddenly laughed. "It's just about recruiting warriors to help you restore your country. I'll take the job." When Leon spoke, the confidence on his face made Luoji fall for him and asked excitedly. "Really? That's great, when do we leave?" "Well, it may take some time." Faced with Luoji's request, Leon used the tactic of procrastination. For now, he still needs to put his personal affairs aside and improve his strength as quickly as possible to become a gaming expert. Fortunately, after equipping the Supreme Fang Tianhuaji, Leon's agility attribute was directly maxed out. Now he only needs to upgrade to about 10 levels to max out the last cunning attribute. As for how to upgrade, Leon has already thought about it, which is to find the Night King and ask him to hand over some of his men. The Night King must have missed Leon after not seeing him for a long time. The White Walkers he cultivated with great effort must also have a home. Perhaps because she could see Leon's perfunctory attitude, Luoji sighed softly. However, at the critical moment, it was Elder Tang who spoke to comfort him. Princess Luoji, I have been waiting for nearly 20 years and I can't wait any longer. But you are different from Commander-in-Chief Lion. You are still young, and one day in the future you will accomplish the great cause of restoring your country. Then the spirits of all of us in the Yi Restoration Army will protect you. The words spoken by Elder Tang contained the implication of moral kidnapping. However, Lion agreed with this, but his attitude remained firm and he seemed to be unyielding. Elder Tang then sighed helplessly, looking as if he accepted his bad luck. No. What if you don't keep your word? Luoji looked at Leon with a suspicious look. Without waiting for Leon to answer, she rolled her eyes and said. How about this, I'll follow you. Since you can't marry me, I'll be your maid. You follow me? That's fine too. Leon was taking advantage of the situation and seeing that Luoji was about to get angry, he quickly changed his words. Anyway, when we return to our own territory at the wall, Lion will have the final say, right? Princess Luoji, the wall is a bitterly cold place, very dangerous, please think twice. Don't worry, Elder Tang, please allocate 20 UD warriors for me. This. In the end, Elder Tang couldn't persuade Luoji, so he personally selected 20 Yi warriors who were about to recover from their injuries to follow Luoji. After returning to Quisante's palace at night, Leon couldn't wait to find Specium. After all, in this era, recruiting troops is not difficult, but finding loyal men who are willing to die for you is as rare as finding a lantern in the dark. After his experience in the House of Black and White, Leon felt that he must promote the loyal Specium as his personal guard, so that it would be justified. However, what Leon did not expect was that there seemed to be faint sounds of fighting at the entrance of Quisante's palace. When Leon and Luoji's warriors came forward, they saw that the two sides fighting were the Night Watch and the water dancers under Quisanti. Although he didn't understand what was going on, it didn't stop Lion from drawing out the Supreme Fang Tianhuaji to help. If the combatants from both sides were not mixed together, Lion would be worried about accidental injuries. Otherwise, he could just take out Liuxing and shoot an arrow to solve the problem. Princess Roji? Should we help? An Yi warrior with a bandage on his head drew his sword and stood in front of Luoji to guard her. After taking a look at the battle situation, he asked cautiously. Don't worry about me, go help. Okay. 10 of you stay here to protect the princess, and the rest of you follow me. At the command of the Yi warrior, half of the team immediately followed Leon to charge towards the battle group. At the palace gate, at least 100 water dancers besieged less than 10 night watchmen. Davos was stabbed several times and fell to the ground in a miserable state. Almost all the other night's watchmen were injured. If it weren't for the outstanding combat capabilities of Benyon Stark, Rhubarb and Spacium, they would have been unable to hold out until Lion came to support them. Commander-in-Chief. Move. There's an ambush. Davos was lying on the ground. He suddenly saw Lion and shouted a warning. However, his shout had the opposite effect. At least half of the water dancers who were raiding the formation turned around and saw Leon. They did not start shouting and attacking immediately. Instead, they quickly surrounded Leon and the Yi warriors with strange steps. Quisanti was now on a commanding height, and he watched the battle happening at the door with confidence. But when he saw Leon coming back alive, he frowned. What happened to the House of Black and White? Why didn't they just poison the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch? Was the price the faceless men asked for too high? Or did you embezzle the blood money? Quisanti looked at his butler with an unfriendly expression, and the latter quickly replied. Lord Quisanti, please forgive me. You paid 5 million gold dragons, and the faceless one has accepted all of them. He also promised to kill the commander-in-chief of the Night's Watch. I don't know what went wrong. Useless trash. After hearing the butler's answer, Quisanti was very dissatisfied. He waved his hand and a midsummer warrior standing behind the butler drew out a dagger and stabbed the butler in the back. Sir, should we stop? After killing the butler, the midsummer warrior asked in a deep voice. Quisanti glanced at the water dancer corps that had formed an encirclement, waved his hand and said. No hurry, I don't believe that the water dancer can't do what the faceless man can't do. The Yi warriors who followed Lion were shocked when they found that their opponent was actually the famous water dancer corps of Bravus. Commander-in-Chief, be careful. Each of these water dancers is proficient in swordsmanship and has extremely strong combat power. After forming a formation, their power increases several times. We must proceed with caution. The Yiti warrior with a bandage on his head quickly called on his companions to stand back to back in a defensive posture against the water dancer, while reminding Leon. Really? I want to see how strong you are. Unexpectedly, Lion had no intention of forming a formation with the Yiti warriors. He picked up his Fang Tian Huaji and rushed out. There were at least 5 water dancers in front of Leon. After seeing that Leon was holding a strange-looking long pole weapon, 2 of them chose to step forward to fight him, and the remaining 3 moved again, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Seeing that there were only 2 enemies and feeling their contempt for him, Lion swung the Fang Tian Huaji without hesitation and swept away the enemy. The 2 water dancers were highly skilled, and at the moment the halberd was swung, one of them leaped into the air with outstanding explosive power, while the other slid down skillfully on his knees, and both of them managed to avoid Leon's first wave of fierce attacks. Seeing that Lion's halberd swung in the air, his moves were obviously old-fashioned. The other 3 people rushed forward, the light swords in their hands were like poisonous snakes spitting out their tongues, and every move was aimed at Leon's vital points. In the eyes of the water dancers, although Leon's weapon has a large attack range, it poses no threat as long as they get close. However, the water dancer's confidence only lasted for a moment. The Fang Tian Huaji in Lion's hand braked suddenly in midair with a flexibility beyond the imagination of the water dancers, and swung it in the opposite direction at lightning speed. Now, even if the 2 water dancers at the front had sleek movements, they could not dodge in time and were split into 4 pieces by Leon's halberd. The other 3 water dancers accidentally stepped into Leon's attack range. He quickly poked, stabbed, and pushed them. The whole movement was smooth and swift. It took no more than half a second and the 3 water dancers fell down one after another. Then, Leon rushed towards the water dancers who were watching him eagerly like a wolf among a flock of sheep, showing his skills and no one could stop him. These water dancers use a light rapier, which is characterized by its swiftness and lethality, emphasizing fast and graceful movement, stealth, and balance. Compared with the long swords commonly used by knights and warriors in Westeros, this rapier is obviously much lighter. However, because of this lightness, their light swords were difficult to effectively block when facing Lion's brutal halberd techniques. Strictly speaking, water dancers are just assassins, and their fighting style is naturally restrained by warriors like Leon. What's more, the halberd in Leon's hand is made of Valyrian steel, which is indestructible. He was beaten by Leon instantly and ran away in panic. The Yi warriors had no time to be amazed when seeing this, and they all rushed forward to beat the fallen dog. After killing all the water dancers who blocked his way, Leon rushed straight to the gate of Kay's ante-palace. In just a short while, Benyon Stark was the only Night's Watchman still standing at the door. However, he did not have the perverted bloodthirsty skills like Leon, and was a little exhausted at this time. The White Walker Big Yellow was directly covered by a Valyrian steel cable and could not move. Lion was furious when he saw the miserable state of his men. He swung the Fang Tian Huaji in his hand so tightly that anyone who touched him would die. On the high platform, Kusanti's face looked gloomy. He always felt that Leon's ability to capture a White Walker alive must be more than that simple. Now it seems that Leon's martial arts are indeed amazing, but that's where it ends. After witnessing Leon's ferocity, the water dancers retreated, and were replaced by a legion of midsummer golden heartwood longbowmen that continued to pour out of the palace. In an instant, at least hundreds of longbows were aimed at Leon. Benyon Stark! Get down! At the critical moment, Leon roared, and Benyon Stark subconsciously fell to the ground after repelling an entangled water dancer. Everyone! Get in position! After the summer golden heartwood archer commander had deployed his troops into position, he prepared to give the order to shoot at Lion, and even intended to shoot the friendly water dancers at the door to death. Lion thrust the Fang Tian Huaji into the ground. Without hesitation, he took out the Lu Xing Bao. Ha, this guy must be crazy. He dares to fight against 200 of us alone. Everyone, prepare to fire. The longbow commander sneered, raised his hand, and looked at Leon with a hint of mockery in his eyes, but did not order to shoot immediately. In his opinion, no matter how superb Leon's archery skills were, he could only kill one person at most, but the bows and arrows of their 200 people could shoot him into a sieve in an instant. The commander's intention was very clear. He liked to see the helpless and desperate expressions of the enemies before they were targeted by concentrated fire. He even politely extended a hand and made a gesture for Leon to shoot first. Idiot! A sneer appeared on Leon's lips. When he saw the enemies opposite him standing in a row, he drew his bow and shot an arrow. OM. Hearing this familiar sound, the White Walker Big Yellow who was tied to the ground shuddered suddenly. This horrific sound reminded it of its compatriots who died tragically in the Saran Mountains. Multiple arrows poured down like a rainstorm, piercing straight into the core of the Midsummer Golden Heartwood Longbow Legion. With just one arrow, the enemy was instantly wiped out, without even being able to utter a single cry. But Lion did not stop, instead he continued to draw his bow and shoot arrows. Each longbowman in the front row was hit by at least dozens of arrows. After piercing their bodies, the arrows continued to fly backwards without losing momentum until they penetrated the entire formation and nailed the enemies to the wall one by one. The arrogant archer commander became Lion's main target, and he was even disintegrated in midair after being hit by Lion's arrow. Kay's auntie on the platform widened his eyes immediately upon seeing this. As it was already dark, he could not see clearly what kind of magic Leon had performed. However, the shrill howls and crashing sounds from the arrows flying were as dense as a meteor shower, and his men fell like wheat being cut, all of which proved how terrifying Leon was. A trace of panic flashed in Quisente's eyes, but he did not think of running away. Instead, greed emerged in his eyes. Kay's auntie was not greedy because of a momentary impulse, but because he knew the origin of the bow and arrow in Leon's hand, and even knew its power better than Leon. There is no other reason. This bow is the national treasure of their summer islands. It was forged from a sacred tree that grew everywhere on the island since ancient times and contained powerful magic. It was given the power of multiple arrows. It passed through the hands of countless generations of kings and was lost 100 years ago. He didn't expect to see it here again. As long as he could get this artifact again, regardless of its power, just because it is a symbol of the king of the Summer Islands, Kay's auntie would be able to legally rule the entire Summer Islands immediately after getting it. At that time, not only will tens of thousands of Golden Heartwood archers be at his disposal, but the world's top 3 fleets will also be at Quisente's command. Thinking of this, Kay's auntie immediately walked down the platform with the butler's body and went straight towards Leon. Ha 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 ha, Commander-in-Chief Lion, this is all a misunderstanding, stop fighting. It has to be said that Kay's auntie was very courageous as he dared to come down and persuade Lion to stop when the battle between the two sides had already reached a fierce situation. Leon turned a deaf ear to this and instead aimed Ryasei at Kay's auntie. With a look of grievance, Kay's auntie threw the butler's body in front of Leon. It's all a misunderstanding. I blame myself for not keeping a close eye on my subordinates. I let this damned butler act on his own and offend your excellency. Leon frowned. This Kay's auntie actually wanted to settle the matter by throwing out a dead person? What a bullshit reason. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you, Kay's auntie? After saying that, Leon pulled the string to its full extent and aimed it at Kay's auntie. The guards behind Kay's auntie were so frightened that they fled in all directions. Having witnessed Lu Xing's power, they were afraid of being implicated. Haha, if there are people in this world who are not afraid of death, I, Kay's auntie, am definitely one of them. After seeing the Ryasei bow in Leon's hand, the greed on Quisente's face was even greater than the first time he saw the White Walker. Ha ha ha, this is really interesting. Do you have some kind of magical treasure that can protect you from a fatal blow? Or is the person standing in front of me now just an illusion of you? Commander-in-Chief Lion, you are right. If I didn't have enough confidence that you couldn't kill me, how could I dare to stand in front of you? Seeing that Kay's auntie was truly fearless, Leon temporarily put down the Liuxing bow in his hand. There was a hint of ruthlessness on his face. Even though the Night's Watchmen he brought with him on this trip were not the most powerful group of defenders of the realm, they were all high-ranking nobles, each of them old and meritorious. With such heavy casualties this time, how could he let it go easily? At this time, the surviving water dancers and midsummer archers all retreated, fearing that Leon would shoot an arrow at them that no one could stop. However, under the leadership of Luoji, the Yi De warriors hurriedly treated the injuries of the night watchmen who fell to the ground. I have a suggestion. Seeing this, Kay's auntie said with a smile on his face. Why don't you let my doctors heal your wounds, and then we can talk about compensation. However, Quisente's words obviously touched Leon's sore spot. Do you think the lives of my men are a bargain in your eyes? Haha, everything in the world has a price, let alone a mere human life. Kay's auntie looked nonchalant as he pointed at the Ryasei bow in Leon's hand and said. As long as you can lend me this bow, I can give you all my property in Bravus. I can ask the Sea King to be a witness for you and me. I think this price should be enough to exchange for the liuxing bow in your hand, as well as compensation for the accidental injuries caused to my men, right? After hearing Quisante's conditions, the surviving night watchmen remained silent. While touring the flower boats during the day, they witnessed with their own eyes how astonishing the wealth of Quisanti was, and heard with their own ears the troubadours describe how Quisanti built up a money empire from scratch that was no less than the Iron Bank. Now, such a huge fortune is just used to exchange for their forgiveness and a bow in Leon's hand? Even after seeing the amazing power of the bow in Leon's hand, everyone seemed to have witnessed a miracle. However, there are things in this world that are more shocking than miracles: money. Many of the night watchmen put themselves in the other party's shoes and thought that as long as Quisanti was witnessed by the Sea King, he would guarantee not to attack the night watchmen. It seems that this deal is quite worthwhile. When all the night's watchmen including Davos, Roger and others looked at Lion, curious about what choice he would make. What if I say, your price cannot satisfy me? Leon once again aimed the liuxing bow at Quisanti. In an instant, a shadow of death loomed over Quisanti's head. The smile on Quisanti's face froze, and he thought to himself, could it be that he guessed what I was thinking? Impossible. What else do you want? Except for all the above. Go on. And I'll take your life. Leon said, staring at Quisanti intently. Upon hearing this, Quisanti's face darkened and his expression kept changing. After a while, the silent Quisanti smiled and called one of his men over. Go and ask Lord Neptune. Yes. The fact that Quisanti did not object showed that he agreed with Lion's proposal. This surprised many people present. Didn't Quisanti hear clearly that after Lion took away all of Quisanti's property in Bravus, he also wanted to take his life? What? Why are you looking at me like that? Quisanti smiled as he looked at Leon, who was slightly stunned. Didn't I just say that? There are many people in the world who are not afraid of death, and I am one of them. For Quisanti's words, Lion could only understand that he valued money more than his life. Or in other words, now I don't even want money, I just want the liuxing bow. To be honest, the Ryacii bow is a must for Leon, who now has a new artifact. Although it is still a powerful artifact for group attacks and monster killing, it does not have the special effect of damaging the mind, and it is unlikely to play much of a role in the future arena of the gods. Before waiting for the arrival of the Sea King of Bravus, Lion hesitated for a moment and asked Quisan a question. Do you know how to upgrade the multi-arrow? Of course I know. Moreover, I think I now understand how you captured the White Walkers. This was a compromise that the poor Night King had to make in the face of the huge casualties among his men. Facing Leon's question, Quisanti smiled contemptuously, and the subtext seemed to be saying, Boy, I know more than you. Is it? Lion also laughed. Just now, Lion saw a description on the panel. Liuxing is a legendary creation, bound to Leon Victor as the master. Outsiders will not be able to use the multiple arrow function. So, the two people with ulterior motives smiled at each other. Leon was even looking forward to the day in the future when a frustrated Quisanti would come running over to him and ask him why Lu Xing couldn't upgrade the multi-arrow in his hands. Lord Sea King has arrived. At this moment, a loud eunuch shout was heard outside the palace gate of Quisanti. The entrance, which had long been washed clean, welcomed teams of Sea King's guards, mainly composed of water dancers and supplemented by other Bravus city defense forces. In the center of the team, a sedan covered with gold foil attracted attention. The Sea King did not show up in person, but just sat in the sedan and said calmly, Master Quisanti, what business do you need me to guarantee for you? Tell me quickly. Lion keenly caught a hint of weakness in the voice of the Sea King of Bravus, but he cleverly concealed it, obviously trying hard to be strong. But Lion didn't care. He is not a Bravus, and the health of the Sea King is not within Lion's consideration. Lord Sea King, please bear witness for me. With the reputation of the Free Trade City as a guarantee, I, Quisanti Hakimi Henry, am willing to exchange all my wealth in Bravus for a bow and arrow named Ryuxing in the hands of Lord Leon Victor, the Night Watcher, and ask him to forgive my offense. After listening to Quisanti's words, the Sea King was obviously stunned for a while, and then he asked quietly. What kind of bow and arrow is worth exchanging your entire fortune for? Please forgive me, I cannot satisfy Lord Sea King's curiosity. You just need to know that this bow and arrow is useful to me. Okay, I won't ask any more questions. Lord Leon Victor, do you have any objections to this deal? Have. What objection? Quisante's terms are not complete. This deal should be saddled with his life. Oh? Is that so? Master Quisanti? That's right, Lord Sea King, this deal does require me to pay with my life. Quisante's conditions were obviously inconceivable. After all, he was dead, so what was the point of getting liuxing? However, Aquaman seemed to know some inside information and simply expressed his approval of Quisante's conditions. Now, as the Sea King of Bravos, I witness this transaction, with the reputation of the Free Trade City as a guarantee, and in the presence of the gods, I declare the transaction complete. Lord Leon Victor, the Sea King's palace will ensure that you will not receive less than a coin from Quisanti. Now, you can give him Lu Xing. After the Sea King finished speaking, Quisanti immediately hurried to Leon and grabbed Lu Xing's bow. Seeing that Leon had no intention of letting go and that the deal was done, Quisanti smiled sinisterly. You want to break the deal? Do you see the Bravos Titan standing there? No matter how strong your Ryasei is, you can't defeat it. It will crush anyone who breaks the deal. Even if you escape its pursuit, there are still countless sea monsters in the summer sea waiting to devour you. I see. But this alone cannot scare a night watchman. After saying that, Leon happily let go. After obtaining liuxing, Quisanti immediately danced the unique dance of the Summer Islands as if he had found a treasure. With liuxing, Quisanti's plan to explore the Valerian secret treasure house can be implemented immediately. When he returns to the Summer Islands, he will raise his arms and gather an army of 100,000 to clear the way. Even if the conditions for opening the secret treasure house are so harsh that the Night King needs to be captured alive, he is confident that he can accomplish it with the glazed bow in his hand. Lord Leon Victor, you can kill Quisanti now. Aquaman's tone was cold and rigid, and in his eyes the deal was not done. Leon glanced at Quisanti who was still alive and kicking in front of him, then drew out the black and white kiss and beheaded him without hesitation. The plundering skill is activated. Kill Quisanti and obtain the legendary item, the Ring of Kingship, Phantom Clone. Ring of the King, left ring finger, with Phantom Clone skill made by the legendary Supreme Dragon King Balerion of Valeria, it contains a projection of a real dragon. When ordinary people wear it, they can add a Phantom Clone that shares 50% of the physical fitness of the original body. It takes 7 days for the clone to revive after death. When worn by a saint, they can release the power of a real dragon and make dragons below the dragon level submit unconditionally. Dragon levels: Dragon Egg, Baby Dragon, Adult, Giant Dragon, Undead Dragon. After killing Quisanti, Leon had an extra ring in his hand. After reading the introduction of the extremely powerful ring, Leon finally understood where Quisanti's confidence came from. It turns out that this was just killing one of his clones. As Leon thought so, at the same time, another Quisanti, or Quisanti himself, appeared in everyone's sight again with a smug look on his face. He calmly took Lu Xing from his clone's hand, then raised it towards Leon with a smile on his face, unable to stop showing off. But soon, Quisanti was no longer happy. Because, Leon took out the ring of royal power that had just exploded from his body and shook it in front of him. How is this possible? How did my royal ring end up in your hands? Lord Sea King! There's a thief! Quisanti immediately rushed forward and tried to take the ring back from Leon. But he had just taken 2 steps when he heard the voice of the Sea King. That's enough, Quisanti! I witnessed with my own eyes that Lord Leon Victor did not pick up any items from your clone. Your accusation is completely nonsense. But Lord Sea King, you know that this royal ring has always belonged to me. I can't take sides with regard to your disagreement. Well, the deal is over and I should leave. Lord Leon Victor, you are welcome to go to the Sea King's palace at any time to receive Quisanti's property. After saying this, the Sea King of Bravos immediately ordered his men to turn around. Leon had a very good impression of this Aquaman who never showed up from beginning to end. This man advocated fairness, justice, and openness, and what he did was quite in line with Leon's wishes. At this moment, Quisanti finally panicked. Even the joy of getting the liuxing bow could not dilute his sadness of losing the ring of royal power. Give it to me, or you'll die. After seeing the Sea King's guards disappear in Leon's palace, Quisanti immediately turned his back on them and pointed the Ryasei bow at Leon, trying to threaten him. Oh? What if I say no? Then I can only take it from your dead body. After saying that, Quisanti became furious and drew his bow and aimed his arrow at Leon. However, in Lion's eyes, Quisente's threats had no effect at all. Because Leon knew that the Liuxing bow had completely lost its multiple arrow function when it fell into Quisente's hands. Okay, I'll stand here and give you a chance to attack me. But remember, it's not without cost, as long as you can afford the consequences. With a sneer on his face, Lion inserted the Fang Tianhuaji steadily into the ground, faced the aim of the Liuxing bow without fear, and said so to Quisente's. I'll give you one last chance. Have you thought it through? Leon's questioning struck Quisente's heart directly, making him stand there in a daze, at a loss as to what to do. Although he was panicking, Quisente's still tried to stay calm and fought back fiercely. If I let go, you will die. However, anyone could see that Quisente's toughness at the moment was just a disguise. Quisente's wondered to himself, could it be that Leon had found a way to use the Ring of Kingship as soon as he got it? Impossible. Without the guidance of the Valerian Treasure Encyclopedia, it is impossible for someone to learn to use the treasures of the Dragon King family without a teacher. The Encyclopedia of Valeria's Secret Treasures was bought by Quisente's from a traveling merchant in his early years. He later used it to obtain the location of Valeria's secret treasure vault, but his several expeditions wasted the lives of countless men, and he only accidentally picked up the Ring of the King's Throne, a relic of the Dragon King's family. However, as if to prove that he had the courage to kill, or perhaps Quisente's accidentally let go. In an instant, the arrow pushed by the full moon-like bowstring of the Liuxing bow flew towards Leon like a wild horse. Careful! Standing behind Leon, Spesum, Benyon Stark, who had seen the Ryasei destroy many whites with one strike, and other Night's Watchmen were ready to block the arrow with their bodies. However, the Ryasei bow unexpectedly lost its unique multi-arrow effect in Quisente's hands. Despite this, an arrow that was still powerful shot towards Lion with unparalleled force. But Lion just lightly waved the Fang Tianhuaji in his hand and easily shot down the arrow. No. How is this possible? Where is the multiple arrow function? Quisente's shouted in amazement. The scene of thousands of arrows being fired at once that he had expected did not occur. It seemed that all this happened just because he accidentally let go of his hand. So, Quisente's, who didn't believe in evil, quickly drew his bow and arrow again, aimed at Lion with a desperate attitude, and prepared to shoot another arrow. But Leon said that he would not give Quisente's a second chance, but Leon didn't have time to make a move. Court death! Benyon Stark, who was beside Lion, was immediately furious. He drew his two-handed sword and chopped it straight at Quisente's head. Quisente's knew how powerful this long-faced night watchman was. If Benyon Stark hadn't single-handedly blocked the attacks of more than 20 water dancers at the palace gate just now. At this moment, Quisente's had enough captives to threaten Leon. So Quisente's did not draw his bow and arrow again, because the distance between the two was only 7 steps. Within 7 steps, the sword is still faster. So Quisente's decisively used Liuxing to block Benyon Stark's sword, then put Liuxing behind his back and pulled out a strange-looking scimitar from his waist. This is a unique sword from the Summer Islands. It looks like a sickle but it's not. It can also be thrown. Lord Ben Yang, please be careful. Davos appeared behind everyone at some point and reminded them loudly. However, his reminder was very timely. At this moment, after Benyon Stark passed by Quisente's, he subconsciously bent down and just avoided the flying knife thrown by Quisente's. However, as Quisente's had lost his weapons, he could only shout loudly to ask his water dancers and Midsummer Golden Heartwood Longbowmen to come out and cover him. However, the morale of Quisente's fellow villagers had been crushed by the power of Leon's arrow. Even though Liuxing had fallen into Quisente's hands, they still did not dare to face Leon and fled in all directions. However, the morale of the water dancers recruited by Quisente's in Bravos was quite good, and they did not flee with the Midsummer people. They gathered in silence around a guy who looked like the leader of the water dancers. The leader of the water dancers glanced in the direction where Quisente's fled, then stood with his sword across his body, stopping Leon and others from chasing him. He stood sideways and drew the dagger from his waist. The water dancers behind him followed suit and made the same move. Seeing that under such circumstances, Quisente's men still had the courage to resist, Leon couldn't help but look up to this group of water dancers. But that's all. Leon doesn't mean he will show mercy to these loyal water dancers. When Lion, holding a halberd, surrounded the last small group of water dancers together with the Night's Watch and Yi warriors, Davos spoke. Master Water Dancer, your situation is hopeless. Even your master has fled. Surrendering now can still preserve some dignity. I believe the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch will treat you fairly. Lion nodded slightly, indicating that he agreed with Davos's point of view. Then, Davos stepped forward, took a few steps forward, and asked loudly to the water dancers. If you are willing to surrender, put on black clothes and become guards on the Great Wall, the mistakes you made today will be wiped out. What will we say when facing death? The leader of the water dancers immediately asked back after hearing this. His words were deep and powerful, as if they could penetrate everyone's heart. This sentence was like a fire, instantly igniting the fighting spirit in the eyes of the water dancers. In Davos's confused eyes, they shouted in unison. Not today. Then, the water dancers launched a fierce charge. They abandoned their previous deft sword fighting skills and instead adopted life and death fighting tactics on the battlefield. Well done! Seeing that the water dancers were determined to fight to the death, Leon did not hesitate, wielded his halberd, and went forward. After about 10 minutes, Benyon Stark led several Yeti warriors to chase in the direction of Quisante's escape, but soon returned empty-handed. Quisanti escaped by water. What a blast! He built a dock in the palace and burned down both the dock and the boat when he left. Commander-in-Chief, I failed to bring back the head of Quisanti and your Liuxing. Please punish me. Benyon Stark stood in front of Lion with a guilty look on his face. As Lion's personal bodyguard, he had the utmost loyalty to Lion in his heart, so he would rather die in exchange for Lion's forgiveness. It's not your fault, Ben Yang. Leon patted Ben Yang's shoulder. Quisanti can escape the Lord but not the castle. Besides, he is just an insignificant person in my eyes. But, Liuxing Bao. Ben Yang still frowned. It doesn't matter. Although the Liuxing Bao is powerful, it is not irreplaceable. Lion chuckled twice. Besides, the Liuxing Bao lost its multi-arrow function in Quisante's hands. No matter how powerful it is, it's just a bao. As long as I want it, I can get it back anytime. Yes, Commander-in-Chief. Ben Yang raised his head, a look of determination on his face. Next time I meet Quisanti, I will never let him escape again. Davos on the side interrupted. The most urgent task is to transport the food to Eastwatch as soon as possible. His Majesty Stannis has sent a message that his operation is going smoothly. The mountain clans in the north have joined His Majesty's army and are in urgent need of food and fodder. If you enjoy the content of this channel, subscribe, like, and comment, to help this channel to grow.